So for those of you that may be new to the channel or wondering what this Make Money with Woodworking series is all about, I've thrown together this compilation video to tell you all about it. Welcome back, guys. So this is another episode of Making Money with Smalls. So if you're new to the channel, this series is all about high profit, low cost items. So we check out what's hot and what is selling in the big box stores, and we break those down so we can put our own twist to it and build them ourselves. A couple of weeks ago, we invaded the Hobby Lobby and broke down some of their builds, and that is what we are going to be doing again today. This one stopped me and caught my eyes because I've had people to send me pictures of something similar to this, wondering how to build it. And it's also pretty cool. So let's go ahead and break this one down. So this is considered a piece of wall art. So this is either going to be inside, outside, wherever that you would like it. And it's really easy to build. The whole thing is 13 inches tall and 32 inches wide. So the majority of this whole thing is made out of a 1/4 inch plywood. Even the backing. Yes, it looks like that it's made out of 3 different boards, but if you look really close, that's all that they've done is they've taken a piece of plywood, ran it through the table saw and put little grooves in it just to make that paneling look. You can actually make this backing out of paneling, or if it were me, I would use fence pickets or pallet wood. And the reason why is that backing is only a 1/4 inch thick. And what they have done is they have glued it to MDF. Do not waste your time with that whenever you can get the full thickness of the material from the pickets or the pallet wood. So I would start off by making this rectangle with whatever material that you have decided to use. Then you can join those boards together from the back just using some strips of wood and some brad nails, or you can use pocket hole screws. The edging that is going around this is 3/4 inch thick, about an inch wide. The corners are 45-degree miters. So what I would do to get this look, once you have your backing made, just go ahead and frame this out and attach that with some wood glue and some brad nails. The writing and the trees, stencils. We've talked about this in other videos. If you have a laser machine, you can laser those in. We can buy some little cheap stencils on Amazon of trees or things like that. Or if you'd rather freehand this, go to town. So the wording, that's all that they have done is they have either bought or made a stencil for this, took a little black spray paint and created this saying. Now the hardest part about this whole build, and it's not really hard at all, would be the mountains. So the questions that I would get would be, what degrees are this? How do you figure this out? How do you make these cuts? Well, it's pretty simple. This is it. These are your mountains. So all of these mountains are cut at 27 degrees. So these mountains are 10 inches, 7.5, and 6 inches tall. And again, they're all on 27-degree angles. So if you wanted to play around with the different heights, you could cut them all at the 10-inch side at 27 degrees, and then remove the bottoms until you get the height that you want. And you tell that's all that they've done is they put 3 in the background, then they offset 2 more in the front. Then to get the different looks for the mountains, that's all that they've done is use different color stains. As far as the design on the top of these mountains, it's a repeating design, so that's all that they've done is they've taken a scrap like this, or maybe even cardboard or however, just drew their design, cut that out, and then they can just lay this on top of their stained mountain and paint that up white to repeat that quickly. So there's a ton of different cool looks that you can get with this. Maybe like a whitewashed white background, and you can change up some of these different colors. They're wanting $50 a piece for these. You could probably build one for around $5, and if they're decorated up nicely, I don't think you'll have any issues getting $20 to $30 a piece out of them. And this next one actually stopped me in my tracks because it was really cool and it looked very easy to build. I really don't remember the price on this one. I think it was like 150 bucks, but I'm going to tell you how to make it a lot cheaper. So what this is supposed to be is like a display from like an old farm store. You know, they would set different types of fruits, they would set different types of items just on the different levels, and each level has a different length. It has a chalkboard at the top, and they would write welcome or the daily special or whatever. But another cool thing about this is each one of these different trays are designed to flip up. And if you look at this little corner bracket here, you can unscrew that and take the front off and lay everything flat. The legs themselves are 3/4 inch thick by 1 1/4 inches. Back legs are 62 inches long, and the front legs from tip to tip, because there's an angle on there, are 58 inches long. So I would start out by building the back frame of this thing. So that's going to be the legs and then the chalkboard. So that's all they've done is framed in a little area for the chalkboard. It's 15.5, so that's the width, by 7 inches tall. And for the backing of this, they've taken some chalkboard paint and then just painted a piece of plywood or MDF and then just attached it from the back. Everything with this is crudely built. So to attach the chalkboard to the side legs, that's all they've done is use some wood glue and then put some brad nails into the side. So to add these front legs, that's a super sharp angle there. So our miter saws do not cut that angle. The front leg spacing at the bottom of this is 15 inches from the back leg. So we already have our back made, and we're going to say that this is our front leg. I bring this out to 15 inches since we know that's what our spacing is. I bring this in until it meets right around that chalkboard and let these overlap. Once you get to that point, I would just mark this angle, and it's going to be a really steep angle. Again, with the typical settings on the miter saw, it will not cut this angle. This would be a super easy cut with a handsaw or even a circular saw. So now you have your 2 front legs cut. to attach this to your back leg, if you want to use the same style that they did, all they have done is taken a scrap piece of 1/4-inch plywood, put some wood glue and a ton of brad nails on the back part of this, and then where it overlaps the front leg, that's all that they have done is drilled a hole and put a bolt through there. It's actually designed like this so that they could ship it for cheaper, but it's a pretty cool design with the flip up boxes. So the boxes. I went ahead and put one of these together, and I'll go ahead and tell you how I did it. I used fence picket material for mine, and for the bottom I used a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. You do not have to use the 1/4-inch plywood. You can use fence picket material, pallet wood material, whatever that you would like. This is 1.5 inches thick. Whatever the thickness of your material that you're using really doesn't matter. These are all going to be just butt joints, glue, brad nails. Same thing with what they did, except their bottom is super thin. It's like 1/16 of an inch piece of plywood. I'm not sure where they even got it. I've never seen 1/16 of an inch plywood. It's almost like a veneer. So you're just going to start off by making your frames. You get the different frames made, and you would just glue and brad nail your bottoms on. So the sizes for these boxes, we know that there's 15.5 inches across between legs. So I made my boxes at 15 inches. It's going to leave us a 1/4 of an inch play on each side. They're all going to be the same width. So they're all going to be 15 inches wide, but the depths will change. So there's 6 different levels to this thing. And starting with the top box, it's only 5 inches wide. Each level that you go down, they've added 2 inches to the depth. So the second box is going to be 7 inches wide. Third box, 9 inches wide. All the way down to your bottom box, which will end up being 15 inches wide. These things are super easy, super quick to build, and super light. Now let's attach these to our main frame that we already have built. And these things will be spaced 8 inches apart. So I would start at my bottom one. I would go up about 4 inches. And then the back 2 legs, I would drill holes at that point. Measure up 8 inches, drill 2 holes on each side. 8 inches all the way up. Then I would take those same measurements and go up the front, except we're not going to be drilling holes. We're just going to be nailing in a 1x1 piece of wood. And what that is for is, as this folds up and comes back down, it just rests on top of that bar. And to install this, that's all that we're going to do is go into our boxes, go in about 1 inch. We're going to drill the same size hole that we've drilled in our back legs. Throw these in there. Throw a bolt through each side. Do not over tighten this because we want it to be able to move freely. Then we would just put a lock nut on the inside of each one of these. That will allow each one of these to fold up. Essentially the whole thing could come apart and lay flat. So if you do any type of sales at markets or actually in-store sales, this thing will make an awesome display and definitely catch people's attention. So you could actually market these things to different floors, to different businesses. Almost everything that you see here can be made from pallet wood or fence pickets, even the bottoms of these boxes. I would get a little bit creative, maybe keep this distressed look, maybe do some whitewash dry brushing with this as well. That would look cool. But with everything staged up nicely, I think that you could easily get $75 a piece out of these things. So if you're still with me at this point in the video and you like things like this, make sure to subscribe. It's as easy as hitting my little logo down in the corner. Okay, so this next one, I know we talked about ladders before, but I thought I would go over this one really quick because they're wanting $70 for this thing. So this thing is only 6 foot tall and it's 15 inches wide. The material that they have used for this is 1 inch wide, about 1.5 inches to maybe 2 inches thick. And for the runners, that's all that they have done is taken 1x1 square stock and they have shaved down the edges. So every time that you shave down an edge, it creates another edge. So you'll shave that down and eventually it gives it this round look. And to connect it to the side legs, so what they've done is shave down the ends, which really you do not even have to do, but it does give it this old school look. They've shaved down the ends just a bit, and they've counterbored holes into the material to slide those into. And you can actually see in this picture, once those are slid in, I'm sure that they've used some wood glue. They've just put a couple of brad nails through that to hold it in place. And as far as the look itself goes, that's going to be up to you guys. It would look great painted any color with any level of distressing. Ladders have always been hot and they will always be hot. But like anything else, the same concept's going to be there. We're just going to change up our colors and our styles to fit what's in right now. Here I've stumbled across the coat hook section, and everything here is simple to make. So first look down there at the very bottom, you see those arrows. We talked about arrows before. Everyone loves arrows. You can just cut that design out from an old board with a jigsaw and add some coat hooks to it. Crazy thing is they are selling every one of these for $45 to $55 each. The most expensive thing in any of these builds is going to be the hardware, and you can pick up a lot of these just on Amazon for dirt cheap. So this next one that they're wanting $45 for almost looks like it has a lattice style background to it. This one is 6 inches wide by 32 inches long. We've used 5/8 material for all of the frame for this. Then the little X braces that's giving that lattice look, just like 1/4 inch shavings of wood that looks to be maybe like 1 inch and 1.25 inches wide. So all that they've done is taken a 3-inch piece of wood and then glued and nailed a lip on the front. So it'll look something like this. This will give us room in the back to attach our lattice boards. You can kind of see it in this picture on how that is laid out. So every one of these boards are going to be cut at the same angle and the same length. That's all that they have done is put all of their boards going one way all the way down, and then went back over the top to make their X, with another set of boards going the opposite direction. Piece of pie to make and a pretty cool design. This next one, there's not a whole lot to talk about because it's literally 2 boards. They're wanting $55 for this because it's rustic. Looks like 2 fence pickets to me that have not been sanded down. I'd put some pocket hole screws in the back of this to join those 2 boards. Don't worry about if it has a gap because it's going to make it look more rustic. And then again, you can find these coat hooks on Amazon for pretty cheap. And this last one I had to throw in here just because of how simple that it's built. It's literally 2 boards. Then that's all they've done is cut a board at 45 degrees to fit into this corner to support the top shelf of this thing. Everything is using butt joints and put together with brad nails and glue. And the reason why I really wanted to show this one was because it was so simple to build, but what made it interesting enough to buy was the fact of how they distressed and designed this. So the hooks for this thing, they're actually bolts. I'm not saying use bolts for this, but it was a cool idea. It's going to be hard to find the actual J hooks for this, so you may have to get a little bit creative for this. But the main point with this is they made it unique with those types of hangers. So let's say if we cannot find those, you can use old doorknobs, old drawer pulls, really anything that gives it a rustic look will set it off, make it different, and people will buy it. And then I got to the section of the store where all of the outdoor decor is at. And there was a lot of nautical themed items. Anything nautical will sell. So these items are actually in an area that they're calling backyard barbecue. They're obviously designed for the outdoor decor, but these would also make great interior decorations. So you can see that these are actually pretty cool. We have the big anchor, we have a seahorse here, we have a turtle. So super cool items. And then if you flip these things around, look at how these things are put together. Looks like they have 50 pounds of staples and brad nails and tons of scrap wood that's holding each one of these different pieces together. This is what I came up with. I think it's pretty cool. And the best part is I made this out of 1 fence picket. This thing was really easy to build and you do not need plans for this. But if you are a plans in the hand type of person and you actually want a printable template for this, I'll throw a link in the description to my Etsy shop and you can find it there. So the first thing that I did with this was draw out the design on a piece of MDF. You don't have to use MDF. You can use cardboard. You can use whatever that you would like. I chose MDF because I had a scrap piece laying around and I wanted something a bit rigid because I didn't want to do like this and put 10,000 nails all into the back of this thing. This is the way the back of mine looks. But you can build any of these projects that are made out of slats just by cutting your material down into strips. I chose 2.5-inch strips. Then you determine what angle that you would like for these to go down at. And then you lay it on top of your template, making sure that it covers all the edges. Then you start at the top, you measure across your template where it's going to go, and you'll cut that length and set that into place on top of your template. Then you'll go down to your next board, do the same thing, measure across. You see how this one actually goes through 2 sections of this. You'll make that measurement, you'll make that cut, lay it across your template, and you'll keep doing that all the way down until your template is completely covered. Then once you know that you have all of your different parts cut the length, go ahead and just number them on the back. That way whenever you're doing your painting or your staining, you can easily put them back in order. So at this point we will go ahead and stain and paint our parts. Once all of that has dried, place your boards back to where they were before, and then this time put the template on top and trace the template onto your boards. And the boards are still not attached. Once the template is on the board, you can take your jigsaw on each one of the boards and just cut this design out. Every piece in this was cut by using a jigsaw. Once all of your parts have been cut, it's up to you on how you want to join this. You can either do like they did, attach everything from the back using scrap material and some staples, which there's really nothing wrong with that. That would still hold. I would just make sure to put some wood glue in between. Or if you have any extra MDF or plywood, anything that's around 1/4 of an inch thick laying around. Regardless of how you do it, it's still going to turn out awesome and they will sell. They're wanting $30 a piece for these things. I use 1 $2 fence picket and I really don't think that I'd have any issues getting 20 bucks out of this. So it's that time of the year. We're having get-togethers outdoors. If you have a pool, you're having pool parties, barbecues, sitting out back, whatever you like to do. But one of the main problems that you have with that is organizing all the pool toys, the outdoor furniture, cushions and pillows, things like that. Well, what caught my eye about this first one is it will solve the problem and it's an organization problem, and you can build one for really cheap. So the OPB has their version. Yes, it's a pretty neat product for $400. I don't think it's $400 neat, but it does the job. Yeah, they've got a couple pool noodles in there. Got a $400 noodle holder. Okay, so let's go ahead and break this thing down. This thing is super easy to build and would be a perfect fence picket project. So if you actually look at this thing, it's essentially just a bunch of strips that are put together. But the super cool thing about this is it's actually just put together in 4 panels. If you look really close at the legs are only made onto the front panel and the back panel. So the side parts of the panel for the front and back are actually the legs. So the actual dimensions for this thing is 36 inches long, 24 inches deep, and then 20 inches wide. And just by looking at this, the strips look like that they're only like 2.5 inches wide. They look wider than that because they have put smaller items actually in this thing to make it look bigger. So let's start with the front and the back panels. And I've got a couple boards here just to use as examples. We'll say that this is our 36-inch leg. That's all that we're going to do is lay out 2 of these on a flat surface, and then we'll take our horizontal boards and we will connect them just like this. So just a butt joint. There's a couple different ways that you can do this. It looks like that they actually use dowels, but if it were me, I would just put this together with some pocket hole screws. And then you'll attach the other leg on your panel the exact same way. So now we have the top rail installed. Now you would just need to decide how far off the ground you would want your bottom. Let's say 4 inches here. You'd measure up 4 inches from the bottom of your leg and then attach this the exact same way. Now, the only thing left that you'd have to do for this panel is using equal spacing, put the rest of your horizontal strips in, using the same method as we did for the top and the bottom. So we've already got the front panel and the back panel assembled. Now the 2 end panels. So the 2 end panels are actually assembled pretty much the same, except there's no leg. So again, let's say that this is 36 inches tall. Our 2 vertical boards for our end panels, since they do not have legs, will only need to be 32 inches tall. And again, we'll lay these out, flat surface. Starting at the top, we'll put our top board on. And then on this one, our bottom board will actually be at the very bottom and be attached. And then again, equal spacing in between. And you can use your first one as reference for spacing for that. So now you have all 4 of your panels assembled. The only thing that you have left to do is to put those together. So to put our panels together, we're putting our front panel. Let's say this is our front panel and this is our end panel. And we're just going to lap it just like this. There's a couple of different ways that you can attach these. If you'd like to, you could pre-drill and just put exterior screws through this. Or from the inside, you could put pocket hole screws to hold that together. You could actually hammer in some wooden dowels and cut those off flush. That's only if you wanted to spice it up a little bit. And then we have the bottom strips. So let's say that this is the bottom of our panels. All that they've done is just fasten it just like this. If you look closely, it is not inset in. The material is actually really thin there. So super easy install. Once all 4 panels are put together, I would turn it upside down, lay my cross slats on top like this, pre-drill, throw some exterior screws in there. You're good to go. I just explained to you how to build this entire thing, and you can knock this thing out super quick using the same thickness of material. And what the PB has figured out is this is popular. People are buying this outside type of item that can get wet, that you can put wet things in. So what they have done is actually created a whole line of products. And yes, you can make every single item in this photo for 1/10 of the price of what they want for just one thing. We'll hit on one other item that's in this picture just here in a bit. But if you decide to make these things to sell, make a whole collection of this stuff. It's all using the same type of material. It will all match and people will love it. Again, the PB is getting $400 out of one of these things. Depending on what type of material that you use, you can probably build one for about 20 bucks. I would stage these things up just like they have, except maybe paint one up with some popular colors, maybe some alternating colors in the slats. Depending on your location, you shouldn't have any issues getting 100 to 150 bucks out of these things. And this next one I've actually seen on several sites, which is an indicator that something is in, something is selling, and something is hot. These stores will track what their competitors are selling, and they're going to make their own version. So it's going to be these hanging rope signs. Okay, so this is a pretty cool idea. And again, this is a super easy project. That's all that this is wooden slats and rope. So what makes this cool is you can actually put several different little sayings, several different words on one sign, and they're perfect for decorating the indoors or outdoors. The bare bones plain sign is 30 bucks. Each one of the strips that are in these pictures, they're all around 5 inches wide by about 16 inches long. Guess what we can use for this? There are 4 slats. Fence pickets around 5.5 inches wide by 72 inches long. So with one fence picket and a rope, you can make this. So my area pickets have came down. The pine pickets you can pick up for about $2, and the cedar pickets you can pick up for a little over $3. I think they're about 3 1/4, something like that. If it were me, spend a little extra money for the cedar. They're usually drier, cleaner, easier to work with, easier to stain, and easier to paint. So with profit margins like this, you know the old saying, you could spend $1 to save a dime. That could come into play. So to save $1 for this build, you're going to be sanding more, the wood's going to be harder to work with, and you may actually have to wait for the wood to dry. So go ahead and spend the extra $1 for this one. And if you look really close at the sides of these things, they're only about 1/2 inch thick. You can use whatever that you have, but you don't need anything any thicker than that. Even if you had material that was a bit thinner, it would be fine. Anything that hangs, actually, it's lighter the better. So as far as building these things, I go ahead and cut my planks to the length that I want. It looks like they've drilled these holes about 1 inch in from the side. an inch from the top, and then measuring from the bottom an inch up. And then for the hole size that you actually drill will depend on the rope that you choose. So whatever size rope that you think that looks the best, drill the holes about 1/8 of an inch larger than that. And for the rope, that's all that you would do is start on one of your bottom boards, tie a knot into the back, and then just feed it through the top rope. Go up, go into the back of your second board, over, through the hole, all the way until you reach the top. Leave the amount of slack at the top that you would actually like to hang this with, then work your way down the opposite side. Once you get to the bottom, again, feed it through, and then tie a little knot. So to keep these into place, instead of having to tie all kinds of little knots the whole way that you're doing this, and making it almost impossible to get your knot spaced just right, if you look at this plain one, this is actually the back view of it. And that's all that they have done is once their boards were spaced the way that they wanted, they attached the rope to the board using staples. I would go ahead and throw some glue in there as well, and then just staple the rope to the board just to keep the board from moving any. Weight will actually create tension, and it shouldn't slide up and down theoretically, but throw a staple in there, just be on the safe side. And again, there's all kinds of different designs for these things, but almost every one that I've seen has been kind of like a neutral color or a light color, the light blues, grays, off-whites, things like that. And the sayings on there, we've talked about the multiple different ways that you can apply those. If you have a laser engraver, you can use that. If you have a vinyl cutter, all of this could be put on in vinyl. That's all that they've done here is just taken a stencil, put it over the top, spray painting the saying on, and you're ready to rock. For me, I'll start off with common sayings that could pretty much apply to everyone, or if you're going to get into personalizing these signs, I would double the price. As far as the price point goes, you can get the bare bones sign for around 30 bucks. As fast as you can pump these out, make these, the cost of material, probably everything together is going to be around 4 bucks, maybe 5 total. $30 wouldn't be a bad price point even for one that is painted. If you like these types of videos and these types of builds, make sure to hit the subscribe button in the bottom right hand corner. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop back over to the PB Outdoor collection here. I'm hitting on this because right now is the time to sell these things. They're neat and obviously people are buying these. And this is going to be the outdoor shelf. This thing is $425 on sale. So this entire shelf is only 13 inches deep by 24 inches wide by 48 inches tall. And they use the exact same type of slats as they did for the first one. So if those were 2-inch slats, we'll say that these are 2-inch slats. So let's go ahead and break this down. Again, another super simple build. So let's start by making a front and back panel. So yes, there is a floor at the very bottom of this, but it'd be easier to add that at the end. So to me at the bottom, it looks like that they only left about 1 inch of space from the ground. We're going to say that the spacing between each one of these horizontal strips is 3 inches. So for the panels, I would again start with my legs. I would lay them flat. So they're going to be 48-inch legs. I would start at the bottom, measure up about 5 inches, which is going to leave us some space for the floor, and go ahead and put my first horizontal board on. The difference is going to be, last time when we put our horizontal boards on, we put them on like this. A butt joint onto the leg. This time we're going to go to the center of our leg, and you can throw in a couple of screws here. Then you'll measure another 3 inches from the top of this board, throw in a couple of screws, repeat until you get to the height that you want. But this looks like it's about halfway, so right around the 24 inch mark. And now for the shelf in the middle, we have our panel flat. I measure up to the halfway point, which looks like it's only going to be about another 12 inches. And then I will install another horizontal slat, the exact same way that we did for the bottoms. And for the top, it looks like that they may have actually went back to a butt joint. I don't know why they would do that when the rest of this build is just an overlap. So we're going to stick with the overlap. So we're going to do the exact same thing for the very top. We're only going to go to about the halfway point. So now we have our entire panel made for the front, and we'll make one identical for the back. Now, as far as connecting these two together to make our sides, so the back side of your panels should look like this. Now that's all that you would need to do to connect this is to take another board, whatever width that you would like the shelf to be. Again, this one's about 13 inches, but you would take another board and just set it right in like this. Now we'll have a butt joint on the inside of this leg. Throw a couple screws in the end of this, and they are connected. You will do that all the way down. There is another way that you can do this. I think that this way would probably be a little easier, but if you would like to, you could put together all of your horizontal boxes before you put the legs on, just with regular butt joints, space those out, and then just add the legs to the front and the back. A couple of different ways to do it. Whichever's easier for you, go for it. And then as far as the shelves go, that's all that they have done is the boards that are on the ends that are connecting the two legs. They've just added boards on top all the way across to make these shelves. Super easy to make if you just stop and think about it. And this thing's 425 bucks, but it's a great idea for outside storage. Anything that is wet, anything that you do not want to blow away, like the beach balls, like the pool noodles. You notice how they staged those up. These are the things that typically blow away and you have to chase them down and mow over them or whatever. And the cool thing about the shelf is they've actually put towels on there. So stage certain ones up like this to really market towards pool owners, because if someone owns a pool, they will buy this. So then I would stage one up that is completely opposite, nothing to do with the pool. Inside the slats on the bottom, I would throw in like outside couch cushions, things like that. And then on the racks, maybe some grilling utensils, outside candles, just anything that would pertain to outside entertainment. So again, this is something that I would not consider a small, but is just as easy to make as the smalls that we cover. And the profit margin for something like this is crazy high. For me, if I'd made this out of cedar pickets, something like that, again, they're wanting $4.25 for it on sale. I would at least start this out at $150, $200, see how they move and go from there. The next one's going to be the child's picnic table. This thing is actually pretty cool and not small. So what gave me the idea to cover this build in a video is I made one of these for my kids over 15 years ago. They've loved it. They've used it every single day. And we still actually have the original that kids still love to use whenever they come over to visit. I know one of the big questions that I will get is, are you going to make this out of treated material? No, I'm not going to make it out of treated material. I'm not going to have a kiddo sit and eat at something that's treated material. And then the next question is going to be, and then what's going to keep it from rotting? We'll just cover that real quick. Things that are made for the outdoors, they do not have to be made out of treated material as long as it's not in the ground or has contact with the ground. But even if it does have contact with the ground, there are things that you can do to prevent things from rotting. So think about these old barns and structures that's been around for over 100 years. That's not treated material, but most of them were painted. So as long as you have something to seal the wood, be it some type of an oil-based stain, some type of paint, anything that seals the pores of the wood, any of these items can last for 100 years. If you notice on these old barns, most of the time the only rot that they have on them is going to be at the very bottom of the siding. That's actually where the material touched the ground. And the reason for that is the way that it's cut, the end grain acts like a sponge. It will soak moisture up into the wood. So that's all that we need to do to prevent that is seal this up. If you've ever noticed whenever you're painting or staining a piece of wood and the end grain just keeps taking the stain and you have to do it over and over and over, it's because, like I said, it's acting like a sponge. So we need to seal this. Again, you can seal this with paint, any type of oil, but what I really like to use is the spray-on rubber that comes in a can. So anything that I have that's outside, I just take that, spray it on there, and we'll seal these pores completely, and you do not have to worry about rot. So for this build, I used one untreated 2x4 that is 10 foot long, and it was only $3.98. I was actually very surprised by that price, but that's what it was. And I'll also be using 3 2x6 by 8 foot long. Those were $4.98, so you can build this entire table for less than 20 bucks. Let me show you how I did it. Okay, so we're going to start by cutting our legs, top boards, and bench boards out of our 2x6 material. I'm cutting each side of the legs at 38 degrees, leaving us at 22 5/16 from tip to tip. Once we have those cut, I'll be cutting 5 more boards with square ends at 35 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll cut my cross braces out of a 10-foot 2x4. I'll need 2 of these that are 34.5 inches long at 22 degrees on each end. And I'll need 2 of these at 16 inches long at 22 degrees at each end. Then once we have those cut, this is what you should end up with. And as always, if you're a plans in the hand type of person, I'll link my Etsy shop in the description. And now to assemble. I went ahead and painted all of my parts, and I'm going to lay my legs out where their tips are touching. And then I'll start at the top with my 16-inch cross brace, centering that up, and then install it using 2.5-inch screws. And then for my 34.5-inch cross brace, I'm going to drop down 3 3/4 of an inch and install this the same way as I did for the top. And now we have one leg assembly built. Now we just need to build another one. Once you have both leg assemblies built, let's go ahead and put our bench seats on. First, I'll square my leg assembly and then leave a 2.5-inch overhang for my bench. Then I'll attach the bench to the bottom crossboard using 2.5-inch screws on each side. Once both benches are installed, let's go ahead and move on to the top. For the top boards, I'm going to be leaving the same 2.5-inch overhang, and I'm going to start with my center board. I'll install using the same 2.5-inch screws, then I'll move on to the 2 outer boards. I'll be spacing the outer boards 3/16 of an inch away from the center board, which I'll just be using my speed square to get that. And that is how, with $20 worth of material, you can end up with something like this. It's that easy to build one of these things. You do not even need a miter saw. Whenever I made the first one 15 years ago, I did everything with a circular saw. And this is one of those items that's going to fall into that golden category where people will spend money on it because it will be for their kid or their grandkid or a loved one. And again, the profit margins on this can be astronomical. We've already said that we can build this for less than 20 bucks. You have to add in the cost of the screws and the paint, things like that. But what if you get it up to $25? Look at the competition for these things. They're cheaply made. They're only about an inch thick, and they start at $200. I've seen them as size $400 or $500, and guarantee you that those will not last for 15 years sitting out in the weather in the sun, where these will. I would sell them unpainted, but make sure to inform the customer that they need to be stained or painted. And if you decide to sell these painted, make up 2 or 3 different ones with different color schemes. So make one up that is stained all like a cedar color. Make another one up that is painted like I painted this one. And if you really wanted to go over the top, you could actually drill a hole and put an umbrella in there, regardless if you're building these things to sell or for your own home. The kids will love them, and there's nothing better to a child than having a picnic outside on their very own picnic table. So this next one is going to be an ornate wall bracket. Okay, you notice how I said ornate just to kind of spice this thing up a little bit. But it's going to be cut out with a jigsaw. And you're going to use a construction grade 2x8, 2x6, whatever that you would like, depending on the size shelf that you would like to put on it. The cheapest that I could find, these were $40 a pair, and they are super simple to make. So like I said, depending on the size shelf that you would like to put on these, let's say that we're just going to use a 2x8. So that's all that you would do is whatever length that you would like this bracket, you would cut your 2x8 to that length. Let's say that this one's about 10 inches long, 7.5 inches wide, which is your 2x8. And they're using a shelf, and the shelf does not come with this. This is just the brackets. They're using probably a 10-inch shelf, which is just a painted 2x10. So for this one, you're going to have to do a little bit of drawing, okay? And this time, I'm not going to do it for you with a stencil or anything like that. You have to work on the creativity part. What is the worst thing that could happen? You can mess up and you can erase it. You've got this. It's up there. Just try it. You'll never know until you try it, and you can actually try it with a piece of paper. You'll start out with a piece of paper, draw your 90-degree angle. Go ahead and draw a second line to your 90 degrees. So to make this a little easier, we want all of the parts of this to be about an inch thick. So move out about an inch, then draw another 90 degree. Now on the tips, where you put in your little arches or whatever that you would like. If you like this design, look at this picture while you're drawing it, but it can really be anything that you would like. And then continue that for the rest of the outside of this design. The inside part that's gone, again, you'll just sketch that out. Make sure that you have about an inch on all of your curves, and then you have your inside design. Once that's on your paper, transfer that over to a piece of cardboard, cut that out, as well as the inside design. Now you have a template, something that you can hang on your wall, you can make multiples of, and you can do it super fast. You have your template, you have your 2x8, lay your template on there, just trace that out. The exterior part of this, you'll just take a jigsaw and jigsaw around your lines. You can always go back with a sander, smooth those up, kind of round those corners over just a little bit, just to make things flow. The inside, that's all that you need to do to cut that out, is to drill a hole in the part that you want cut out as close to one of your lines as you can get without actually going over the line. Start your jigsaw and work your way into the line, and then you just follow that. Once you get to a corner, you may actually have to go back in a couple of times, working your way down that line until there's enough material removed that you can turn your jigsaw blade to follow your next line. And that's what you're going to do for each corner. And then you'll just follow any arch that you've made. It's as simple as that to cut this design out. And the cool thing is, it does not have to be this design. You can add your own to it. You may create something that is super cool that everyone wants. Have multiple options. But once you get this made, you'll need a way to mount it to the wall. And we're going to be using a keyhole bracket for this. They're super cheap, and you can pick them up on Amazon for around $1 a piece. But to install this keyhole bracket onto the back, that's all that you would have to do is trace the outside of this bracket. Then I'd just put a little dot where each one of the screws need to go. Okay, so we'll pretend like I just traced this on there. I don't have one here, so this thing kind of looks like a peanut. Well, anyway, you've traced your bracket, and then you have your drill bit that is the same diameter as this. What I would do is start at the top and the bottom, and you only need to drill down the thickness of your bracket. So it's probably only going to be like a 1/16 of an inch. The reason why we're doing that, so the bracket can sit flush inside the board, and your screws will still have wood to bite into. Now, as far as the center where the keyhole part goes, I'll drill that down at least 1/2 of an inch, because that is what is going to be sliding over the screw that's sticking out of the wall, and be able to go into that keyhole and lock into place. They are super easy to install. Once you install one, you can knock them out in probably less than a minute. But in order to do that, you have to attempt the first one, which means means you have to believe that you can do it. I know that you can do it. You just have to tell yourself that you can. So as your homework for this week, I want you to draw this out on a piece of paper. Even if you don't want one of these things, draw one out just to show yourself that you can. Yes, it may get frustrating at times, but keep going. That's how you do things. That's how you learn things. If you're having trouble with some of these curves, find something that has a natural curve and actually use that. But draw it out on a piece of paper. If you like what you've drawn, transfer that over to a piece of scrap wood and cut it out. The next thing that you know, you may have a couple of these brackets already made and people will want them. Whenever I look at these things, I picture them painted in like a distressed white, but you may like it in like a dark stain. Either way, they're going to look good and they're super cheap and have a super high profit margin. And for our first item, this came straight from the OPB. We have a decorative paddle. So does this general shape look similar to other items that have been hot in the past, like charcuterie boards, cutting boards, and then it eventually evolved into a cheese board? So now from the marketing aspect, they realized that the market is getting saturated with each one of those things. So now they came up with this decorative paddle. They're not calling it anything, but you can use it for anything. So you can actually use it for all of those different items, which I don't care if you call it a cheese board, I don't care if you call it a cutting board, whatever, you can use it for all of those things. But by changing the name, it seems like they have created a new item. So what caught my eye about this decorative paddle, that it is different than anything else that we've actually seen. And now they are stepping it up and giving it a rustic repair look. So back in the day, whenever you would bust a table, bust a piece of wood, if you could not cut dovetails and put those in, you did this. You would bend over a nail or a piece of metal, whatever that you had, drive it into both edges of the split, and it would keep it from splitting more. I've seen this done before on super old farmhouse tables, but never on a cutting board. I'm just going to call it a cutting board from here on because I don't like saying decorative paddle. I mean, it sounds like you're about to whip somebody with it. So really the only difference in this and other cutting boards or charcuterie boards or whatever that you want to call it that we've covered in the past is that split end. This is awesome because oftentimes when we're working with wood, these are the pieces that we're just going to toss that are naturally split. So as far as the outline and the design of these things, you already know how to do it. There's a million videos out there and we've actually covered it ourselves. It's super easy, especially on these one plank boards. So if you're wanting to replicate this, of course you have to have an end cut with a crack in it. Well, we're not going to have a ton of those, so you can make your own. That's all that you'd have to do is take your plank of wood, maybe put one end in a vise and just start bending it a little bit. Be careful, do not bend it too fast or it will snap all the way. Let's say that if you're using something like pine, and if the pine's grain goes all the way up, it's going to split completely in half. If you notice on a lot of these, there's a swirl in the grain. That's what's going to help stop that crack from going up. Or if you notice in a lot of these, it's a fibrous type of wood like this oak. So it's not just going to snap. Those fibers are going to want to help to hold that together. So if you're creating your own crack, maybe try to use a wood that's kind of similar to that. So once you have your crack material, be it a scrap piece of wood or something that you have put the crack in, now we need to create this stitched look. And it looks like what they have actually done is they've used some type of a thin square stock. Closest thing that I could think of. Now help me out here. If you guys can think of anything that's kind of thin and square, drop it into the comments because I was drawing a blank on that. What they used to do back in the old days, they would take a square nail. You still buy these square nails. They may be listed under horseshoe nails, but what they would do is they would take these and they would actually bend these to make a staple. So whatever you decide to use, you can use this. You can actually use a new steel nail. See where I just bent that end. Depending on where you're at on the gap, put this in a vise, pair of channel locks, whatever. Then you just bend this down, snip off the end to make a staple. Paint it black. No big deal and super cheap. Instead of hammering this in, go ahead and pre-drill a hole on both sides of that crack that is the same distance as your staple that you have made. Put it on your board, mark it, drill a hole on each side of that crack, put in a little bit of epoxy adhesive on both sides, and just slide this right in. Let that dry, you're good to go. Finish this out. Really, you can finish it out in any way that you would like. Since this is technically not considered a cutting board, it's a paddle, and it's really mainly for decoration or for a serving tray. Most likely they just applied like a clear polyurethane finish on this. But if you'd like to make it to where people can cut or eat off of, then you'd use like a cutting board or something like that. Either way, super easy to make. And the handles, any shape that you want. As you can see, they just kind of cut whatever shapes that they would like. You can do the same. And for the tops, that's all that they have done is drilled a hole and put a leather strap in there. You can pick this stuff up for super cheap off of any craft store or off of Amazon. And after I thought about it, as far as the crack goes, you could actually use this leather strapping instead of any kind of a metal. drill your holes all the way through, then you could run your stitching design all the way down. And depending on the pattern that you want, if you want this pattern where it's just the flat bar look, then you would just feed it in and put your cross section in the back, go down, back over. Or if you actually wanted the stitched look where it crosses, then you would just thread these through in the opposite way. Then you would just run that pattern on the top. So that was just a quick idea, and I think that I like the leather idea better than that one. Either way, it's a super cool product, though PB is wanting $80 per paddle, and they've created different size paddles because people will buy 2 or 3 to set around their house. So $80 a piece. If it were me, I would try to move these in the $30, $40 range and sell them as sets. So this is another one from the PB, and I had to throw this one in here since we're already talking about this decorative paddle, serving tray, whatever they want to call it. Now they have also came up with this style. Okay, so they're calling this a modern cheese board because the dimensions are 1.5 by 7.5 by 26 inches long. That is a 2x8. Look at it. It's just a square 2x8. It's either pine or fir, but it is a 2x8. So for $130, they are selling a 26-inch piece of a 2x8 with a hole cut in the end. And they're calling it a modern cheese tray. Calling it modern just because all of the edges are perfectly square. We don't have the contours, we don't have the curves, we don't have all of that. It's just square. Even the handle that's cut into it is more of a square shape instead of the rounded shape. I'm not going to spend any more time on this. I just had to throw this in there. This is pretty self-explanatory on how you do this. You finish it with some type of a board oil. I do not know how well these things would sell. I know that they are selling them or it would not be on their site or in their stores. But like I teach, just because I don't like it doesn't mean that someone else wouldn't like it. So give it a shot. And this next one, a wooden star. We've talked about these types of items in the past that have always been popular and pretty much always will be. The nautical themed items, star items, hearts, things like that. But what got my attention on this one is it was listed as a bestseller. It is completely made out of plywood, and they are wanting $68 for this thing. Yes, it's 3/4 inch plywood, and 3/4 inch plywood is expensive. But this doesn't even look like cabinet grade plywood. It just looks like plywood. But regardless, this is a 24 by 24 star. In the previous video, I actually taught you guys on how to draw a perfect star of any size. So if you're interested in something like this and you don't know how to draw a star, you can check that out. But the cool thing about this is that it can be completely cut out just using a jigsaw, regardless of whether you want to make the version where they have cut the center out as well, making this negative space star, which is pretty cool. Or if you just want to make the solid version with no negative space and put some type of writing or saying on that. So let's say that you wanted to make this star with the negative space. And the only thing that you have to use is a jigsaw. You're really not going to be able to save the cutout from the middle, which would be super awesome because you would actually have 2 products to sell. You can sell the main outline and then the part that you cut out. There is a method that you could use with a jigsaw where you actually walk the blade into the wood, but I'm afraid with plywood it may create too much of a tear out. If you have a router, you could, however, cut this out with a router and be able to keep that center part, or if you had an oscillating tool with a wood bit on it, you could cut this out with that as well. But regardless of whether you keep the center or not, the next thing that you would do for this star is to stain or paint it. And it actually looks like they want people to see that it's plywood. I don't even know what kind of a look that you would call that. I don't know if it would be like a modern industrial or whatever, but they are making zero attempt to hide that it's plywood. If you actually look at the edges of this, you can see where all the different layers are glued up, which is obviously plywood. So maybe this is an end thing. If it is, let me know because I have no clue. So these are 24 by 24, so they're very large stars, and that's why these things are selling. So if you use those dimensions and you just start with 2 by 2 squares, you can get 8 of these out of a sheet of plywood. They're wanting almost $70 for each one of these. If it were me and they were stained or painted, I would try to move these right around the $30 mark. And that would still leave a ton of room for profit. So this next one I really, really like, and I know that they would sell like crazy. And that is this pallet wood wooden flag. Okay, so I know that there are tons of versions of wooden flags out there, but there's just something about this. So this would be your perfect pallet wood project because pallet wood looks just like this. It already has the nail holes. It's kind of beat up and you want to leave all of that in there. You could easily replicate that if you wanted to make this out of fence pickets, but for this one, it may just be easier using pallet wood. They are wanting $150 for this flag, and honestly, I don't think that they're too far off. If I were making these to sell, I would probably try to move them right around the $100 price point, and it's because it's different. You do not see these everywhere. And I guess one of the reasons why I really like this look, because it reminds me of the inside of an old house that had like the shiplap and the plaster. Okay, so if you've ever seen behind one of those walls or if you've taken off all the plaster, it's a big mess, but if you've ever done it, You know what I'm talking about. It's just those thin strips about 2 inches wide with about 1/8 of an inch gap in between, and it just creates this cool vintage look. So let's talk about how they put all of this together. So obviously you can see that they've used the strips on top, but it also has a border around it. Okay, we're not going to put the border on yet. If you look through those cracks, you can actually see vertical strips. You can make these flags any size that you would like, to whatever width that you would like this to be. You can go ahead and cut 3 strips for the back using the same material that you're going to use for the top. And these strips are just going to be connecting strips. Is what is holding all of these strips together. So you'll need one on each end and one in the center. Then you'll just space those out to the length that you want. So the halfway point is where they ended their section for the stars. So starting from the bottom, I'd take a 48-inch strip. The thickness of these strips really do not matter as long as they are the same. And I would attach it to the bottom to all 3 of your horizontal boards. And really for something like this, Rustic is fine. You can use brad nails and wood glue to do this. Then you would just continue adding these full-length strips up into the point of where you would like your stars to begin. This is roughly the halfway point. Looks like that they actually have 1 extra strip for the stars section. Now once you're up to that point, whatever length that you decided on, let's say the 48, you're just going to cut 24-inch strips to finish the right-hand side. And we will use the same spacing as you did for the bottom. You want to actually be able to see through this. So now you've attached the complete right-hand side as well. Now for the stars panel. Whenever I say panel, so it's all that they have done is taken those 24-inch pieces and then stacked them flush on the left-hand side all the way to the top. As far as the star pattern itself, that is paint. So it's all that they have done is taken a stencil. Again, you can pick these up off of Amazon for dirt cheap in about any size that you would like. And most likely before they nailed them to this, they had all of those boards off to the side, put the stencil on, add some white spray paint to it, and then attach those boards to their flag. So at this point, you have all of the front made and the back. And now that's all we need to do is put on our side border. And really the only reason they put this side border on is to kind of hide the underboards. So to me, it looks like the border is just about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches wide. They did not even miter the corners. These are just butt joints. They're going for that rustic primitive look. So now you would just add your border covering all those edges that we're talking about, and then just attach this border using brad nails and wood glue, and make sure that you get a nail or 2 into each one of these horizontal strips. Again, they want $150 for this. I'd put these out there at about $100 a piece, and you don't even have to put a finish on it. Okay, so this next one, they are marketing these as mountable boxes, and they're super cool. And yes, everyone loves boxes, and I cover a lot of different things on crates and boxes. It's just because it's an evergreen type of an item. You can sell it year-round, and it always stays in style. But this design I have not seen before. They've actually integrated hardware cloth into the edges, and then you have your typical ends. That makes it different. That makes it marketable, and that is what is making these things sell. So let's go ahead and discuss these ends. And similar to other crates and boxes that we've done before, solid wood is about 4 inches wide and about 8 inches long. And then that's all that they have done is cut a handle into it. So to cut this handle in, I would measure in a couple of inches from each side, measure about 1 inch down from the top, and that would leave you with 4 inches of handle. So I would center that in, mark the edges where you're going to cut that out. The 2 outside edges, I would use a spade bit. Whatever thickness that you would like this handle, let's say if you want an 1 inch opening, then just use an inch spade bit, Forstner bit, whatever that you would like on each end. And then take a jigsaw and connect those 2 holes, removing that center part. Then you would just repeat that for the other side. So now let's get down to how they actually put this hardware cloth in there. So first of all, you just need to decide what size hardware cloth that you want to use. You can pretty much pick it up at any type of hardware store, but the squares that make this up are different sizes. And if you look at this, it looks like that the hardware cloth is actually made into the wood itself. And what they did to get that nice clean look is super simple. You need to make a groove in your material, and this is simple to do. So all that you have to do is set your table saw to where it is in the center of the board that you're cutting, and then set your depth. That's all that it will take for this design, is about 1/4 of an inch of depth, because each one of these strips around the hardware cloth, since the total height is 4 inches, those are only about 1 inch wide strips. So instead of trying to cut your 2 long pieces, the top and the bottom, and then your 2 side pieces into little pieces and then run them through your table saw, just cut 1 long strip, run this groove, which is the thickness of your table saw blade, through the center of this entire board, and then you can cut your parts to size. So if this box is 12 inches long and the handle parts are on the outside of this, let's say that you're using 3/4 of an inch material, the horizontal side strips are going to be 10.5 inches long each, and then your 2 small vertical strips are only going to be 2 inches long each. And I know my example is wider boards, but whenever you set these on top of each other, and again, these are just butt joints, it's going to sit like this, but the inside would look like that. That is where your hardware cloth is going to go. So you cut your hardware cloth to size, go ahead and insert it in between your 2 long boards. Then you would just slide your inboard over on each side, locking in that hardware cloth. right into those little grooves that you've made. And that's all that they have done to lock these into place. Because these strips are only an inch wide each, they fasten this together with brad nails and wood glue. That's all that there is to the side panels, which is the main part of this thing. So you have two end pieces and you have two side panels made. The side panel, if you look at the edge, will have this little cut in it. But no one will ever see that because of the design of this box. The handle boards or the end boards will go over that part, hiding all of that. And that's all that they have done is put that together with some wood glue and some brad nails. As far as the bottom goes, you can use whatever material that you would like to inset that, throw in some brad nails, or you could take some 1/4-inch plywood and nail it to the bottom like they did. So if that came across as sounding difficult, I promise you that it is not. And when you're done, you're going to have a super cool, unique crate, basket, whatever you would like to call it, and they will sell like crazy. For this last one, I've had a ton of people comment saying that they have laser cutters at home and were wanting some creative ideas to use that for. So if you have one at home, let me show you a couple of things that I've been seeing on almost every site. So I've never been comfortable with lasers because I've never used them. But after a few months of using my Thunder laser, it's pretty cool. So I'm going to head over there and we're going to talk about this first one. So this first one is going to be basic signs, okay? Except you're going to make them large. You're going to make them bigger. What I'm seeing a ton of is one-word statements. So like this. This is just hello, but it is a 16 by 15 cutout. I've seen different variations of just this one word on several sites. On all of the different sites that I have found these, they were wanting between $50 and $75 a piece. And this next style is super cool, and I've seen it everywhere, and it's always on people's bestseller list. They've used a laser to etch the wooden parts of these designs. For everything that hangs over the wood, it's actually metal. But what if we use our laser cutter to cut this out of a thin piece of plywood and just paint it a color to match what we have burnt? Attach it to the sides, and you'd have an awesome piece of art that's selling for upwards of $75 a piece everywhere that I've seen them. So that's just a couple of ideas that I've ran across and thought about you guys out there that had laser cutters. So this first one is going to be from one of my favorite places on earth, the OPB. And again, like I've said before, if these high-end stores are stocking these items and they're located in their popular or hot items section, they are selling these things and they're selling them at crazy prices. So keep that in mind anytime that you're in any of these stores or on the website. They will not waste valuable shelf space on things that will not sell. So the PB is a master whenever it comes to taking an item that was previously hot, redesigning it a little bit, and putting it out as a totally different item. And here's an example. So on this first one, this is a cookbook stand. In the past, we covered a cheese board that they were selling that was a very similar style. Obviously, they found that this was a hot item, and as it started to trend down, they created a brand new product using a similar design. And I think that this thing is awesome. So yes, this is a super cool cookbook stand, but they are wanting $189 for this. What is setting this off from other stands is this design. It's almost like an inlay design, but it is super simple to do. So let's break this down. So the backboard of this holder is 11 inches wide by 11.5 inches tall. So what would fall within that size range that we could get our hands on pretty easily? And that could be a couple of things. So we can buy 1x12 boards, which are actually 3/4 by 11 inches or 11 1/4. And I looked those up, and for an 8-foot 1x12, right now in my area, they're right around $16 a piece. Well, but that seemed a little high to me. So I started thinking, what else is similar to this? Shelving boards. Just scrolled over to the shelving department, and the exact same 1x12s was in the shelving board section for $12.33. So if you decide to make something like this, I would use shelving boards. We're going to rip our board down to 11 inches wide and 11.5 inches tall. Whenever you make that height cut, put a 30-degree angle on the bottom of this board. And that's what you're seeing here at the bottom. It looks like it's right around 30 degrees. And then the actual stand that holds it up from the back, it looks like it's cut at 30 degrees as well. So we'll have a 30-degree top, and it looks like it's only about 6 inches long. But back to this backboard. So what is setting this off? The backboard itself is the only thing that is painted. The rest is natural. And that's what's giving this wow factor. And the next step is going to be to cut this notch into the material. And it looks like this notch is only about 1/4 of an inch deep. Whenever I say notch, it's where this 2-inch board is actually resting into to make it look like that it's inlaid in or inset in. But if you zoom in at this green one, you can actually tell in the corner where they have just cut this 2-inch notch in the board and then just glued in this inlay. So to get this notch, you can do this a couple of different ways. You can use a dado blade or a dado stack if you have one on your table saw. If you do not, no worries. You can get the exact same result using your table saw and the blade that is on it. Looks like that the notch itself is about 2 inches wide and sits down from the top about 1 inch. So if you're using your table saw, raise the blade up to where its highest point is 1/4 of an inch, or whatever the thickness of the material that you're going to be inserting is. Then you'll make your first cut at 1 inch away from the top edge. And then all that you would do is repeat this cut, moving the board over 3/16 of an inch at a time, or whatever the curve of your blade may be, until you get a 2-inch notch. Super simple to do, super fast to do, and you do not have to have any special jigs or anything like that to achieve this. So now we have this notch in our board. It's time to paint it. We'll go ahead and get this painted or stained or whatever that you would like to do to it. And then while that's drying, go ahead and cut your other parts. So we've already talked about this insert that it looked like it was around 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch, whatever that you have cut your dado to. So let's go ahead and get that sanded, get it ready, because you're not going to be able to sand this once you have it inserted. So it needs to be sanded and finished on the front and the ends before you glue it in. And also, if you want a tighter bond with the glue, do not paint inside of the notch that you have cut. And this is what's going to set it off. So maybe you could use a contrasting wood to your colors. Looks like that they have just used some oak, but really a strip of any type of hardwood would look really nice with this. Whatever species that you decided to go with for your insert, go ahead and make the bottom cookbook holder out of it. And if you notice, it sits in about 1 inch from the sides. As far as attaching this to your backing, I'll place this where I wanted it. Take a little pencil mark on the inside once it's level. Take it off, then measure down 3/8 of an inch and pre-drill my holes from this side. This is going to ensure a proper placement. We would not have to get our measurements from the back off of that 30-degree angle. And then I would just glue and screw this in from the back. And as far as the stand holder itself, there's a couple of different ways you can attach that. Easiest way to do this is to go ahead and get everything nested together at this 30-degree angle that lines up, glue, and throw in some brad nails from the back. So with just a little bit of work and creativity, you can take less than $2 worth of material and make something that the big box stores are selling for $189. Now, I would not try to get $189 out of this because you're going to have a hard time. But you could even go a step further and add a family name or a saying to the front lip of this and make it customizable. If you do something like that, make sure to charge a little bit more, but as is with the proper staging, I would not be afraid to ask $60 to $75 a piece. This next one is from the P1, is because it's that time. I was scrolling through their website and they have their fall decor out. This was on the front page, and they want $130 for this set of painted 4x4 cutoffs. So like I told you before, whenever you see the big box store starting to make items for different seasons, it's time for you to start making items for different seasons. The first ones with the items out for those seasons are going to be the first ones to make the sales. So we have seen similar setups for this in the past. That's all that they have done is taken 4x4s. You could use a brand new one, cut them to these lengths, which is 8, 12, and 13 inches, and then paint them all black. Wait for that to dry, and the rest is going to be in the distressing. I would hand distress these, especially if you have a black undercoat. Take a fine grit sandpaper on the orange and the white one until that top coat starts to come off. Do not sand these before because you want material to be able to come off. Make sure to follow the grain whenever you sand, and do not sand too deep or you'll go past your black base and into the natural wood color. And if you look at the black one really close here at the top, that's actually what they have done on purpose. Since the whole thing is black, they are actually using the natural wood as their offset color. The candles, we've talked about candles before. You can pick them up for next to nothing on Amazon. They're dirt cheap for these electric candles. They've added the designs after they've distressed the boards. That's all that you would have to do to make these templates, to draw these out on a piece of cardboard, cut those out, and then just use some spray paint. It's not that hard. Look at the ghost, okay? Those are kind of like misshapen circles. For this look, you want it to look vintage. You do not want perfect angles. Look at the triangles on the pumpkin. You notice how they're not like sharp, acute angles. You want it to look like it was all hand drawn. So hand draw it, cut it out, stencil. They're wanting $130 for this set. We're not going to get $130 for this, but you have very little in this material. This is going to be one of those items you're going to have to test the market in your area to see what you can get out of these. But one thing that I do know is that these will sell. It's a bookshelf, and it caught my eye because it's different. It has this funky shape to it that kind of flows. This thing would be awesome in any corner, and especially like in a child's room or a little reading nook somewhere. What caught my eye about this was the design. It looks like that it would be a very intricate design. It's not. It is super simple to do, and you could pump these out if you wanted to. Right now, this 11 by 11 by 62 inch tall bookshelf is on sale for $140. And yes, that's not a bad price for this. if it wasn't made out of MDF and it's going to fall apart in a couple of years. So let me tell you how to easily make this out of solid material. So to start with, almost everything on here is working off of 11-inch pieces. Or if you were going to sell several of these, I would use cabinet grade plywood and use some edge banding on the exposed parts. So let's go ahead and tackle this funky curve that they've got going on here. So that's all that they've done is taken an 11-inch board that is 62 inches long, and we'll pretend like that this is our 11 by 62. I know the dimensions are all funky, but you'll get the point. So they've taken that one board, they've measured in 3 inches on the bottom, came straight down the board, then arched over, and then straight back down at the 3-inch mark to create this. And that's all that they have done is turned this sideways. If you can look at this picture and then look at this example, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So now we know how they've done the hardest part of this whole build. The rest of it's just putting it together. We're going to pretend that this is a 10 1/4 by 9 1/2. Sound like Mr. Rogers. We're going to be pretending, okay? I like to use examples, and a lot of people learn by saying, so this is how we're going to do it. 10 1/4 by 9 1/2. Those dimensions are important because the rest of this will be sliding in around it. So if we were starting at our bottom, this is what it would look like, okay? There's your feng shui. I don't think feng shui actually applies to this. There's your neat. I'll just call it neat. There's your neat looking bookshelf design. And that's all they did is take one board, the exact same boards that they're going to be using to make the rest of this, cut it in half, and moved this to the other side. It is a piece of pie and creates an awesome look. So we know the dimensions of the inside. Now our back two pieces are going to be the exact same size as this first one was. So in total, you're going to need 3 of these 11 by 62 panels. One of those you are going to lay out your design and cut that like this with a jigsaw, and then the other two will just nest in around. So those dimensions that I told you earlier, those are important as well as the layout. So your first board that you are attaching, I would attach the curved board with the wide base, and this is going to sit completely flush with the front, and then the back 3/4 of an inch overhang. That way we can bring in one of our backboard and attach it flush to this. As far as attaching all of this, that's all that they've used is glue and brad nails. I would throw some screws in there and maybe put some plugs. When you go to install the second part of your main design with the narrow part down, it's going to sit flush on the front with a 3/4 inch overhang on the back. And that will allow your second backer board to just nest in flush with this. That way what you are seeing in the front is completely flush all the way around, and all of our butt joints are going to be on the inside that's back against the wall. So essentially it's just hiding those butt joints. It's eye-catching. There are a ton of different possibilities that you could use this for. This would make an awesome bourbon cabinet. This would be super cool in a bathroom. You stack your towels and your washcloths on. So think outside of the box whenever it goes to marketing this. They are only marketing this as a bookshelf, and that is who will buy this. People will not think outside of the box like that. You have to do that for them. So whenever you stage this up, stage it up as a bookshelf, stage it up as a bourbon cabinet, stage it up in a restroom with washcloth, whatever comes to your mind. That's how you create something interesting, and that is how you sell it. And they are wanting $140 for this thing, and I don't think that they're that far off. I would sell this for $140. Yours is going to be solid wood, and it's going to be staged up in a way where people will remember it. So if you're still with me at this point in the video and you think that I have earned it, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And while you're at it, make sure to check out our Patreon community. We are having a great time, and it is growing like crazy. If you don't know anything about the community, just check it out. I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. Next one's a little bit different. It's a game, okay? So we've talked about this in the past. Games will actually fall in that category that people will spend money on because it's a form of entertainment. And so I came across this game. They're calling it Stacking Wall Wood Game. So kind of really original there. It's essentially exactly what the name says. They're stacking these blocks up and they're making a wall like this. I like mine better. And the whole point of the game is just like your old school Jenga, where multiple players take turns pushing out these wooden blocks. And the first rule to Stacking Wall Wood Game is you don't talk about stacking wall wood game. If you know that movie reference, drop it into the comments. But this is just like old school Jenga. It's a multiplayer game, but instead of these blocks being stacked in a square, they're stacked into a wall. Take turns pushing the blocks out, and whoever it falls on loses. I've never seen this game before. So they are wanting $56 for this exact game. I don't know what the average price for this is because I've never seen it. And it looks like that people play it more overseas than they do in the United States. But it's a super fun game to play. I actually made 2 prototypes, and it's a fun game. And the super cool thing is that you can make this out of 2x4s or scrap wood. And so this is the prototype that I made out of a 2x4. Did not use stain or paint or anything like that just because this is my prototype. Just FYI, I will be giving you the dimensions for every part of this and teaching you how to make it. But as always, if you're a plans in the hand type of person and you would actually like the plans for this, I'll put a set of plans in my Etsy shop and the link for that will be in the description. This is one that I made out of some old pine that I had laying around. There is no stain on this. I just used the natural colors to make my offset pattern. I think it turned out pretty cool. So this prototype is not fastened together like this, so I can show you exactly how it was made. Like I was telling you earlier, how you play the game is you can use a pencil or take a little dowel rod. This is just a 3/8 dowel rod that I put a tip on, and you take the blocks out. You take turns. Somebody loses. Again, the competition is winning $56 for this thing. I made this out of one 2x4. And again, with this being a game and being a different type of game, people will spend money on it and they will buy it. So every one of these blocks are 1.5 inches tall. That's the 2x4 length flat, 3/4 of an inch thick, and then you'll have two different lengths. The larger blocks are 2.5 inches long, and the short blocks are only 1.25 inches. So whenever you're cutting these short blocks, make sure to put a sacrificial board against the fence if you're using your miter saw, just to keep the block from being pulled into the saw. If you have any type of a table saw sled or miter gauge, you're going to get a lot cleaner cut cutting these on the table saw. So the blocks are super simple to make. Now the sides. The sides are just as easy to make. These sides are 1.5 inches tall, by 1 inch thick, by 9 3/4 inches long. And that's all that I've done to attach these sides to the base, is put 2 pocket holes in the bottom of each one of the sides, and attach them 1/2 inch in from the end and the front. And the base itself is 1.5 inches thick, 2.5 inches wide, and 14 1/4 inches long. And then there's just one final piece, and that's this cap. And this cap is not attached. It's just used as a weight to put down pressure on these blocks. That way they don't fall as easy. And that's it. And like your most successful games that are out there, the simpler the game, the better. I'd never seen this version of it. Think of some super cool name for it. Something better than Stacking Wall Wood Game. Maybe like Wrecking Ball. I don't know. But just think of a super cool name for it. And then once you have your super cool name, even if you're making this out of 2x4s, put a little extra effort into it and stain these different colors. You do not have different color wood like this. That will actually allow you to stack these in different patterns like I did with this. And people can actually use this as a decoration whenever they're not playing the game. I think it's a pretty cool idea, and that it turned out great. You have no excuse not to make these, and I'm telling you now, these things will sell like crazy. So while we're talking about games, we know that people love them, we know that people will spend money on them. Let's talk about this oversized block wooden tower game. They call it everything. There's literally 100 different names for this from different companies that are making it, and they are all expensive. And I personally have had a ton of people ask if I could make this game for them. And that's all that it is wooden blocks. And most of these are just 2x4 material that's been stained. They're wanting almost $90 for this set. That's all that they have done, is taken the small game and they're making it bigger and bigger. So all of these different companies sell the small and the jumbo version of this. This is what a jumbo block looks like. So the jumbo version of this is well over $100 online. So next time you're online, make sure to look up Giant Jenga. And so for the mid-size version, the $90 version, that's all that it is 56 of these wooden blocks cut out of 2x4s, and you can actually look at the ends of the natural one and actually see that it's a pine or fir or some type of a soft wood. This one is 1.5 inches thick by 2 inches wide by 6 inches long. That's it. Replicate that 56 times, charge $50. They're charging $90. Charge $50, you'll get it. And it is a super fun game to play. I've played it. It is a great outdoor game. And for the jumbo version of this, the blocks are 1.5 inches thick by 2.5 inches wide by 7.5 inches long. Still 56 pieces, it's just bigger. I'm sure the next time I go onto the site, they're going to have one that's like 10 inches long, and before we know it, we're going to be building these things out of 6x6s just to one up each other here. So this is an awesome and an impressive size, and it can be done out of construction grade 2x4s. As far as the bag that they're using to keep this together, I guess you could probably get one of those made, but we did a video not too long ago about how to make 2 wooden crates out of a 2x4. If you want to talk about making your product stick out, put these blocks in one of those painted up wooden crates. You can make the crate for less than $2, and people will not hesitate to pay the extra money for a storage box that they can use as home decor to actually store the wooden blocks when they're not being used. So not only have you saved money by not having to buy this ugly black bag here, but you've also made your product different and increased its value. So for this next one, earlier in the video, I was talking about the PB taking something that was hot and maybe trending out and creating something new with it. So for all of you guys and gals out there that have been making cutting boards, This one's for you. Coasters. If you've been making cutting boards and you like making cutting boards, take that exact same principle, thin it down. These look like they're only a half of an inch wide. That's all that they have done for the stand is taken a scrap board that's the same size as the coaster, drilled holes, glued in dowel rods into each one of those corners, and made a stand to hold all of these together. This is genius. They're really cool. They're wanting $94 for a set of 4 of these. You're not going to get 94 bucks for a set of 4 of these, but coasters are hot and they will sell. So make sure to check out your local market, see what things like this are going for. If there's nothing like this in your local area, set your price high and then you can always work your way down. For this episode, I'm going to be teaching you how to make each one of these squirrel feeders. So let's go ahead and dive into the making of the picnic table. So as always in this video, I will teach you step by step and give you the dimensions to every part. But if you are a plans in the hand type of person, I'll throw a link in the description and the comments below to my Etsy shop. And for those that have never seen any of my plans, they are extremely detailed and simple to follow. Shameless plug. And just like I did with the picnic table for one of my other kids, any and all sales from either one of these plans will be going to the kid that designed it. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into this build. What I love about this picnic table design is that it's super easy to do and it does not use much material. To start out on this one, that's all that I've done is taken my fence picket, cut a 1 1/4 inch board off at full length, and 2 1-inch boards. Since there are a lot fewer parts on this one, let's go ahead and cut all the parts at once. We're going to cut our legs, and for this we'll be using the 1 1/4 material. We will be needing 4 parts that are 8 inches long from tip to tip. Both of the ends will be cut at 45 degrees. So I'll make my first 45-degree cut, then I'll measure down 8 inches. Then I'll just use a square or a flat piece of wood to strike my line. Then I'll just slide the board down and make my cut. And then once you have your first one cut, you can use this as a template for the rest of your legs. Now that we have our 4 legs cut, let's go ahead and make our seat braces. And for this, we'll be using the same 1 1/4 material that is 13 inches long. I'm just going to add a little bit of decoration to the edges of this and knock off these sharp corners. So to do that, I'm going to measure up a 1/2 inch on the ends of each board, set my saw to 45 degrees, and then make those cuts. So now let's go ahead and cut all the parts for our picnic table slats. And for this, we're going to be using our 1-inch material. And each one of these slats are going to be 10 inches long. We'll be needing 9 of these. And the last 2 parts that we'll be needing to cut will be our tabletop supports. These are going to be 1 inch by 5.5 inches long. Once we get these 2 parts cut, just like we did for the seat brace, I'm going to measure up a 1/2 inch on each end, set my saw to 45 degrees, and make those cuts. So now with all of our parts cut, let's go ahead and attach our brace boards to our legs. I'll be using a piece of scrap board on the bottom just to help keep the legs square, and we want the tips of the legs to be touching. So next, let's go ahead and add our 13-inch seat bracket. This needs to be 1 1/8 inch from the bottom. I'm just going to throw some marks on there so I know where to add my wood glue. And then from right to left, we're going to be needing 2 3/8 overhang measuring from the top. Now let's install our tabletop bracket. It will sit flush with the top. We will have 1 inch of overhang on each side. Throw a couple brad nails in just to keep it in place. And the reason why we're going to be using screws on this is because it's a pretty big build and we're going to have quite a bit of weight hanging from one end. So we'll flip our board over and then I'll measure up 1 3/4 inches from the bottom of each leg. Once we have our 2 marks, we can go ahead and take a straight edge and mark our center. Now with that marked, I'm going to measure in 3/8 from each side. And for our top screws, I'm going to measure a 1/2 inch down, and again 3/8 from each side. I know I've said it several times throughout the video, but these measurements would be perfect for making a template or a jig. So with our screw placement marked, I'm just going to pre-drill and install my screws. And for this, I'm just going to be using some 1-inch exterior screws. So this is what the leg assembly should look like. So now let's go ahead and build another one just like this. Now that we have our 2 leg assemblies assembled, let's go ahead and add our benches in our top. So just to help to hold these 2 pieces together, I'm just going to take one of my tabletop boards. I'm not actually going to measure and put this into place, but I'm going to clamp it on both sides. And again, this is not where it's going to go. I'm just doing this so I can make my adjustments without my parts falling over. So I know that I'm going to be wanting a 1/2 inch of overhang on each side of this table. So let's go ahead and pre-drill and mark out each one of our slats. We're going to install our screws at 3/4 inch in the center of the board. And then once you have your first one pre-drilled, you can actually use this as a jig to pre-drill the rest. So with our slats pre-drilled, let's go ahead and install our 2 outer seat boards. These boards will sit flush against the edge of the brace. Like I mentioned, we'll leave a 1/2 inch of overhang. Okay, so with our 2 outside seats in place, we can go ahead and undo our clamps. Let's get those out of the way. And now we're ready to install the rest of our boards. So I'm going to go ahead and start by finishing out my seats. For my spacing, I'm going to leave about 1/8 inch gap. To make this a little quicker, I'm just going to use a couple of washers. Now that we have the two seats installed, let's go ahead and put the top on. I'm going to start by installing the top on the two outside edges, and then I'll install my center boards with equal spacing. And there we have it. Super cool, super easy to build. The only thing that we would have left to do if you wanted was put a screw in the very center for a corn cob. And then we would also need to put two screws on the inside to attach this to the side of a tree, or however that you would like to attach it. Some people do not even want these on trees. They just like setting them out on another table. So you may pre-drill those if you're selling these, but I wouldn't actually put the screws in unless the customer wanted them. As you see, that was a super easy and profitable build. And now it is time for the porch swing. And if you guys have any suggestions on how to improve either one of these builds, drop them into the comments. And coming up with different ideas for an existing build is something that we've been working on in our Patreon community. I'll post a picture of something random and just ask, what do you see? What would you do with this? It's crazy how people see things in different ways and come up with ideas to improve on a build. So if a community like that sounds interesting to you, I'll throw a link in the description. And I'm super pumped to announce that this channel now has its own Discord group. We have huge plans for this with group chats, live streams, and it's looking like that this will be the new home for our brag boards. So if you have any brags that you would like to submit, make sure that you check out the link that I'm going to put in the description for the Discord server and submit that brag. I'm a little worried about this one. It's super cool, made out of one fence picket. So you can essentially make this for $2. And it is the porch swing squirrel feeder. And again, like any of these other smalls, things like these sell like crazy, and if you are going to go into mass production mode, then I would make sure to set up jigs. It's going to be for the spacing, laying out parts, you know, things like that. I may not do that for all of these because I'm not going into mass production mode, but if you are, use jigs. So a little disclaimer for this one, do not try to sit on the little mini swing. It will not feel good. So that screw is actually for a corn cob. A lot of times on these squirrel feeder builds, you will see something like this. If you did not want to put a corn cob on here, you could set a container on this thing, or actually turn this last slat up and use this as a feed bin, whatever you like. I like the way that this looks because it looks like a porch swing. Let me show you how he built it. So for all of these builds, we're going to be using fence pickets that are 5.5 inches wide by 72 inches long. And we chose to use cedar for our builds because it cleans up nice and it's only a couple of bucks more. For the first part of this build, we're going to be using our 1.5 inch material, and we're going to be needing 2 boards that are 10 inches long and 2 boards that are 5.5 inches long. So there's a lot of smaller parts for these builds. So anytime that there's a smaller part that needs an angle, like this one, cut it out of a longer strip. So I would cut all of my small parts that had any angle first. Let me show you what I mean. So I've set my saw to 20 degrees, and this board is a longer board. I'm only needing 5.5 inches. I'm going to make my 20-degree cut first, and then I'll measure 5.5 inches from the tip and make my flush cut. So this was cut at 0, this is cut at 20 degrees. I need 2 of those. All right, so for all of these builds, with the exception of the table, I'll be using exterior wood glue and brad nails for most of the assembly. Let's get started on this base. Okay, so to start out on the bottom, we have our 2 10-inch boards, and then we have our 2 5.5-inch boards with our 20-degree angles. Let's go ahead and connect our 20-degree sides to one of our 10-inch boards. And once you have both of those attached, just flip it over and we'll go ahead and attach the back 10-inch board. This would be a good time just to remind you guys that if you're planning on painting or staining any of this, it'd be a good idea to do that before you assemble it. Okay, so once we have our base done, let's go ahead and attach the seat boards. We'll be needing 6 of these that are 10 inches long by 1 inch wide. And if you want the sharp corners of these to be knocked off, let's go ahead and do that before we nail this down. Okay, so now it's time to attach our seat boards. I'm going to start with this back angle, and we are going to place it even with the back board. All of these will be 1 inch in. And now I'm going to install the front board. I'm going to leave a 1 inch overhang on the outside and about a 1/4 inch overhang on the front. And now to install the rest of these, we're just going to be using equal spacing with 1 inch each side. All right, so this is where we're at. Now let's put the backboards on here. We're going to start with our 2 pieces that are 1 inch by 10 inches. For this, I'm going to be using a little bit of a longer nail. These are 1.5 inches. Then once we have the 2 vertical back supports on, then we'll add the 2 horizontal back supports. Both of these are 1.5 inches by 9 inches long. And for these, the top of the bottom board will be installed at 3 inches, and the top of the top board will be installed 1/2 inch down. All right, and this is where we're at. Now we just need to add the seat backing and our arms. Okay, so for our seat back, we're going to be needing 8 pieces that are 1 inch wide by 6 inches long. And if you want to decorate this up like he did in his, you want to add a little bit of an arch to this. There's a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can either use a jigsaw to knock those edges off, or you can do the whole thing with the sander. So pretty easy to get that look. And it actually goes a lot quicker if you have a belt sander. So once we have all of our backing around the door, let's go ahead and get those installed. I'm going to start by installing the 2 outside boards. And for the spacing of these backboards, I'm going to be using right at around 1/4 of an inch. So we'll be needing 2 of these vertical arm supports. They're 1.5 inches wide by 1.5 inches tall, cut at 90 degrees on one side, and then 3 degrees on the opposite side. This is what I was talking about earlier about cutting angles on longer boards and then making your 90-degree cut. And then for the top part of the arm support, we'll just be needing a 1 inch by 6 inch board. And then to put these together, we want to measure in 1 inch. And at that point, we want the longest tip of this small board to be at that mark. I'll be using 1.5 inch brad nails for this as well. Now with our arm supports made, let's go ahead and attach them to the swing. The vertical arm support should be sitting flush, and then we're going to measure 2.5 inches in from the edge of the front. Then we will attach it to our backing and our bottom. Now for the actual arm rests. The arm rests are 7 inches long by 1 inch wide, and again we need to round the outside edges over. So let's do that. So to install these, it's going to line up on the inside and go past the outside edge. We're going to leave 1/2 inch of overhang over the arm support. Only thing that we have left to do is to touch up some of these other edges with the sander and then add our eye hooks and chains. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark the top of my arms for the eye hooks, and I'm going to mark at 1.5 inches and 5.5. I'm going to pre-drill these holes, and they're only going to be 1/4 inch in from the edge. That way the eye hook not only goes through the armrest, but into the armrest support. Quick tip on installing eye hooks or J hooks of any kind, you can actually chuck one up into your drill and install it that way. Install your chain. This is actually a super handy chain for about any type of application. It's called a number 16 jack chain. And we're going to start out on each side putting 10 links connecting the 2 eye hooks. So as far as where to actually connect this, I would actually find the balance point, and at that point I would connect the chain that's going to be attached to whatever you want it to be attached to. And there we have it. Not too bad, but is it good enough to win this competition? Don't forget who brings you awesome content every week. But honestly, this is a great concept. It's actually a lot bigger than what it looks, and people will love it. Again, anything that has to do with outdoors, anything that has to do with feeding birds, feeding chickens, obviously, feeding squirrels, people will buy it. There's only one thing left to do, and that is to put a screw through the center of this board. I'm going to leave that out for now because I may put a little tray or something like that in mine. The only change that I would make personally would be on this arm support. I would actually put a couple of little 1 inch screws into the bottom, and the same thing for this little corner here. I'd put a screw there just because there's a lot of weight being pulled up. Other than that, he did a great job on this design, and I'm a little worried. So while doing the research on the trending items from the big box stores, I noticed something kind of different this year. There's one item in particular that is being hit on hard, just in different styles, and that is pumpkins. Of course, every single year pumpkins will be hit on, but it seems like this year from the woodworking perspective, there are several different styles that are in, and that's good for us. What I noticed is that almost every single one of these sites that I went to, they have everything staged up really nice on a front porch in different height levels of decoration. So instead of everything just being on the ground, they're raising these things up using different types of decoration to create depth. So when you're staging up your items, make sure to do the same thing. And one of the items that I will be covering in a bit will be perfect for, of course, selling, as well as staging your items in that manner. So this first one that I'm going to hit is from the OPB. Okay, so does this look familiar? We have pretty much covered something similar to this from the PB for every season. And the reason why that they keep bringing these things back for every single season is because they are selling these things. Okay, if you notice that any type of a big box store is repeating a look with just a little bit of a different theme, that means that they have had seasonal success with the previous ones. So these are the pumpkin trays, and these are not being marketed as charcuterie boards or cutting boards because PB has noticed that those terms are kind of going out, or the market is being flooded with that. So yes, these are the same type of things that they were selling last year as charcuterie boards and cutting boards. By doing something as simple as changing the name, they have created an entirely different product. So these are just serving trays. These serving trays or serving boards come in 2 different sizes. The small version they are selling for $135, and the large version they're selling for $165. And they have done something a little different with one of these styles that I haven't seen them do yet. Typically everything so far, like the cookbook stands from the last video, everything was painted a solid smooth color, and then we would have a strip of darker wood going down the middle, or it would be paint on paint. For the fall version, they actually have a pumpkin cutout that is completely natural with a painted strip going through the center. So since I've covered how they do this in previous videos, just a quick rundown is find a template of a pumpkin that you like. Any type of a design will work. It does not have to look identical to this. Just make sure that the stem is long enough on the template that you find that you can actually use it as a handle. And the handle is another little thing that they've changed up with this. For the painted ones, they are going for what we call this modern rustic look. And instead of using grass string or twine like they have for the natural ones, they're actually using leather. You can pick up a bundle of this thin leather stripping for really cheap on Amazon, or your local big box store will probably sell the exact same material as real leather boot string. So once you have your template, you will just trace that out onto your material. Now these are a little bit larger. The small ones are 15 by 17 and the larger ones are 18 by 20. Now that's also counting the stem, but the base of this entire project is made out of pine. So we've discussed this in the last video. You can either glue up some 3/4 inch pine to make your base, or look at the pine shelving section of your local big box store. Again, oftentimes pine shelving is a lot cheaper than actually buying 3/4 inch material, and it comes in wider widths. So once you have your template on the material, stop. Do not cut this out yet. We want this material to stay square until we have this groove cut in there. And this groove is what is going to hold this strip. Let's just say that these strips are 1/4 inch by 1 inch. That means that the groove that you need to put into your base to accept that needs to be 1/4 inch deep and 1 inch wide. So once you know your width and your depth, and you've actually traced this out onto your square or rectangle piece of wood, and now you can decide where you want your strips to actually go through the pumpkin. So yes, you could do this a lot faster if you had a dado stack on a saw, but if you do not, you can actually do this using a circular saw. Or even faster, if this material is 1/4 inch thick, raise your table saw blade up 1/4 inch, and then just set your fence up where you can run the material face down through the saw and actually cut this notch out a blade thickness at a time. And once the notch is removed, now it's time to cut out the shape of this pumpkin. And we're just going to use a jigsaw for this. Personally, I like a jigsaw blade that looks like this. This is called a scroll blade, and it's a lot easier to maneuver with. So once you have your shape cut out, go ahead and sand around the corners, and any of them that you are going to paint, go ahead and paint those before we put the wooden strip in there. And if you're making the natural one, go ahead and paint the wooden strip that will be inset into that one. Regardless of which pattern that you're going to be using to do this, I would recommend not painting inside of the notched out area that will actually receive the wooden strip. That way, whenever we glue in our strip, we'll have a strong wood to wood bond, and you don't have to worry about the paint getting in the way. And that's all that we're going to be doing, is putting some wood glue in that groove and then clamp down this strip. If you're making the natural board with the painted strip, I'm going to assume that they have sealed this with some food grade oil. So before you oil it, go ahead and glue in that painted strip. Once that's dry, then you can oil the whole thing. These things are super easy to make. Everyone that sees one of these will want one. Everyone that sees one of these now wants one, but they're not willing to pay $165. So you do you, you put your twist to it, you beat their market pricing, and sell the heck out of these things. And before we jump into this next one, I'm just going to show you this. Okay, so my wife tried to sneak one by me here. I found this as part of her new fall decoration. This is a piece of MDF. Something that I could have easily made out of any type of scrap wood that I have around here. And that's all that they have done, is put a base coat of black on this, came over the top with white, let that dry, and then stenciled in this saying, sanded it off a little bit, sold it to her for $10. Something that I could have made out of scrap wood, they sold it to her made out of MDF. I bet you wish you could have been a fly on the wall for that conversation. Okay, so this next one, this ladder, or is it a ladder? They're not advertising it as a ladder, they're advertising it as a towel rack. The reason why this is falling into the fall, see what I did there? Category is because I've noticed that a lot of these towel racks are actually using them as a part of their fall decorations. You know, they're wrapping like the fake leaves and stuff like that around it, or hanging like the pumpkin banners or whatever, but it's all blending together to make this fall scene. We're going to make this the exact same way that we would have made some of the taller ones, but these are designed for hanging. So these things are super easy to make, and these would be the perfect items to decorate up with several different color schemes. So the side material is 3/4 inch thick, it's 2.5 inches wide, and it's only 16 inches long. And you're going to need 2 of those. And for the rungs of the ladder, you are going to need 3 pieces of 3/4 inch dowel rod, just like this that are 10 inches long. And then for the rope, if you decide to make it to where it's hangable, it's just a piece of rope. You can make it as long as you want. So the first thing that I'm going to do is get all of my parts ready before I assemble this. There's a couple of different styles on these ladders. Some of them, the tops of the sideboards are actually rounded over, and some they're just perfectly square. So if you want to round those over, you can do that with a sander, or you can do that with a jigsaw. But once you get done with whatever you're wanting to do, go ahead and stain or paint your parts. Once that dries, take your two sideboards, lay them flat on a table. I want you to measure to the 4-inch mark, the 8 and the 12-inch mark. In the center of that board, drill down 1/2 of an inch with a 3/4 inch Forstner bit or a spade bit. And what that's going to do is create a pocket for this to sit in. So once you have that done on both sides, go ahead and put just a little bit of wood glue in each one of the pockets that you've just drilled. Lay one of your sideboards flat, drop in your 10-inch rods, and then put your second sideboard on. And while you have it in that position, go ahead and just add a brad nail on the end of each one of those. Once that glue dries, it's not going anywhere. And then for adding this rope, whatever the diameter of the rope is that you have, increase about like 1/8 of an inch. Drill your hose down 1 inch from the top, run it through, tie a knot, same thing for the other side, and you're done. It's as simple as that. They're wanting $25 to $30 for these things, and you could probably make it for less than $2. All right, so this next one, it is another kind of pumpkin looking thing. It's called a pumpkin sitter, okay? So I guess what they're saying whenever they're calling things sitters is they will sit up by themselves. So these really do not look like pumpkins, but what they're going for here is kind of like this folky Amish style look, which even though they kind of look odd, it's kind of a cool look. You know, it's different, and that is what this is all about, is creating something different. But this is super, super simple to make. And remember the material sizes that I'm about to tell you, because all those sizes will come into play for the last one where they've taken this idea and created a new product out of it. And to give you an example of what they did, I made this. Painted mine orange. I kind of like it. But they had made 3 different sizes of this, and then they just attached them together. They just nailed and glued 3 different heights of this to make one big unit that sits up by itself. So they are selling this sitter for $52. You can make it for a heck of a lot cheaper than that and sell it for a heck of a lot cheaper than that. So this entire thing is 10 inches wide by 25 inches tall. That's including the top of the stem. But there are no boards in this build that are actually 10 inches wide. If you notice that they are actually layered and offset to give it that width. It looks like the material that they're using here may be 6 to 8 inches wide, depending on the offset that you want. But honestly, this would make a perfect fence picket build. Okay, so 5.5-inch material. I'll cut the tallest board right around 20 inches. The second one maybe around 14. And then the shortest one, it's a little bit more narrow than the other one. So maybe take 1 inch off the width of that. Cut that one right around 7 inches tall. And then as far as getting the shapes on these, it's a duplicated shape like this. That's all that they've done is made just a little arch, flattened it out a little bit, and then a sharp drop off. Why this design? I have no clue. You can change it up to any way that you would like. I'm just telling you how they did theirs. Then the rest is going to be painting it the way that you would like. They have a white on white and then an orange up front. Personally, if it were me, I would change it up a little bit. Maybe the back one be white, the middle one like a light gray, and then the bottom kind of like that distressed orange there. And then you would just glue and nail all of those together. As far as the stems, when I first saw this, I thought that they were actually inset into the wood, but they're not. If you take a close look at this, you can take any type of thin scrap wood that you have. Like for this example, I just used a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. But if you had thin solid material, it would look a lot better. And I really like the way that they have kind of distressed this up. They've lightly whitewashed the stems and then sanded that back off, kind of giving it this dull look. The back and the middle stems look to be about 6 inches long, maybe with 4 inches of overhang. And then the smallest one's a little bit thinner, a little shorter, maybe 4 to 5 inches. Glue, brad nail those on, and then distress the entire thing just along the edges. And then as far as decorating this thing up, that is up to you. They've just used grass string or a piece of twine and a little ribbon that says something about fall. But you can really decorate this up any way that you want. Again, super, super easy build. They want $56 for this thing. If you make it out of a fence picket, you would have $2 to $4 in it. You price these things at $25 to $30. I don't think that people would blink an eye. And if you haven't had a chance to check out our Patreon community or our Discord community, check that out. I'll throw a link in the description for both of those, but we are having a great time sharing our builds, talking about tools, you name it, we discuss it. So if that sounds like something that you're interested in, check it out and we'll see you there. And so for this next one, do you remember at the beginning how I told you that people were staging up their decorations in different levels? Well, this is one of the ways that they are doing it. For a bench that is similar to this, they're wanting $180 for. So whenever I was doing the research and I first saw this, it reminded me of one of the styles of farmhouse benches that I used to make to sell with my harvest tables. So what I decided to do is just take that simple design and make a 2-foot bench out of it. Now the bench that they are selling here is made out of 3/4 of an inch material. So that kind of tells me that this is just intended to be a decorative piece and really not to be used as a bench all year round. So I decided to make mine out of 1.5 inch material. It's actually where I got the scraps to make this out of. So if you want to make a bench and a pumpkin, buy a 2x10 and a fence picket. It'll make more sense here in a minute. And you can make both. But by using 1.5 inch material for the seat as well as the legs, it's going to make this thing super sturdy. So not only can you use it for your staging and your decor, you can actually use it as a bench. This is a super easy build, but if you would like the plans for this, I'll throw those in the Etsy shop as well, and the link in the description. So to make this, start off with your 2x10, which is actually 9¼ inches wide. Go ahead and cut off those rounded edges and make it a solid 9 inches wide. So now let's go ahead and start by cutting our parts from our now 1.5 by 9 inch board. The bench top, or the seat itself, is 24 inches long, so you'll need a 24-inch piece of that. And then the legs, we'll need 2 boards cut at 18 inches. And that's all that we need from that board. Now let's cut our fence picket into a 4-inch strip. From that 4-inch strip, cut 2 boards that are 24 inches long. That's going to make up the 2 aprons or side boards. Then with the last part of that 4-inch strip, let's go ahead and cut this little shelf or leg support, whatever that you would like to call it, and it's going to be 17 inches long. Then you'll have a long strip of wood left from the fence picket that's going to be like 1 inch, 1.25 inches wide, however thick it was to start with. Let's take that board and cut 2 8-inch sections that will act as this shelf support. And now let's go ahead and make our legs out of those 18-inch boards. First thing that you need to do is at the very top, you need to cut a 10-degree bevel. Then at the very bottom, you'll need to cut an opposite 10-degree bevel. These 10-degree bevels are what allow us to have this pitch and the bench to still stay sturdy and flat. So once those are cut, let's take our bottom and cut our design into it. That's all that I did was measure over 1.5 inches on each side, made a mark, measured up 5 inches and over 3 inches and made a mark. Same thing on this side, up 5 over 3, made the mark, and then took a straight edge and connected those points and cut that out with a jigsaw. We'll repeat that step for both legs, and then we'll make our aprons. So for our aprons, we have our 4 by 24 inch board. I measured down 1.5 inches, and then I measured over 1.5 inches to the bottom. Connected those 2 points and made my angle cut. Did the exact same thing for the opposite side, and that is it for the aprons. Now the last piece that we would need to actually cut will be this shelf. So we already have it at 17 inches. And the only thing that we're going to do is put a 10-degree bevel on each side. That way it fits snugly in between the 2 legs. So with all of our parts cut, assembly is pie. I started by putting a few pocket holes on the inside of my 2 legs. Then I attached them to my seat, 4 inches in from each side, using 2.5-inch pocket hole screws. So with the legs in place, the next thing that I attached was the aprons. That's all that you'll need to do is put some wood glue on the edge of the seat, as well as the leg that it's going to be attached to, and then just brad nail it from the outside. And then we'll do the exact same thing for the opposite side. And then for the shelf, starting with these 8-inch brackets. So from the bottom, I measured up 5 1/8, and that's to the bottom of the bracket. Glued and nailed those in place on both sides. I centered the shelf or the brace on the brackets and glued and nailed that into place. And that's all there was to it. It did not take very long at all to create something that you could use as decoration or an actual piece of furniture. So they're wanting $180 for something like this that you can technically build for less than 15 bucks. But as far as pricing on something like this, you need to check and test your area. I would market it as like farmhouse or primitive Americana. But the first one that you make, use it for staging all of your fall items together, and you'll probably have people that want to buy the whole set. And if you've made it this far into the video and you like things like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell, because I have plenty more where this came from. All right, so this next one I'll just cover really quick because check this out. Do those look familiar? It's just they're not all fastened together. So this is not a pumpkin sitter. They are marketing these as pumpkin plaques. The difference is these actually have sayings on them. That is the only difference. So they've taken the exact same design and made 2 different products out of it. Pretty smart. But for those exact same dimensions that I gave you earlier, use those because they did. And like we have talked about in the past, there's a couple of different ways that you can get this lettering. You can go on Amazon, buy the stencils for these sayings, or they don't even have to be sayings. They can just be fall pictures. It could be leaves or something like that. Or for those out there that have a laser engraver, you can do what I'm doing now. I have one set up in my Thunder laser, so let's go ahead and check that out. And this is how it turned out. Pretty cool, I think. So if you have access to a laser, it will definitely give you a more clean, polished look. If not, use stencils. I mean, they did, and they're selling this size for 20 bucks a piece. Just thought I'd throw this one in there just as an example of how they thought outside of the box to turn one product technically into 4 different products. And so for this first one, it really caught my eye. And what I noticed is that it was on several of the top sites. So whenever you find something like that, where there are several sites carrying the exact same item, they may call it something different, but it's the exact same item. That means that they are all selling them and they are hot. They're just like anyone else. They're competitors. So they keep an eye on what each other are selling, and then they bring that into their store or something very, very similar. So what is it that caught my eye? This folding fence system. So it didn't catch my eye just because of course, I love fence pickets, but it's actually how they've made and distressed this fence system that makes this perfect for marketing. So right now, this is in the fall section of most stores. But if you look at the staging in a lot of these, they are letting people know that really you can use it any time of the year in about any type of setting. You can use this as an inside decoration or an outside decoration. Or something else that I thought of is you can actually use this as a decorative pet barrier instead of those ugly, like pull out fences that lock in and all that stuff. This would look 10 times better than any of those that are on the market. So let me tell you a little bit more about this fence system. Each one of these consists of 3 different panels connected with hinges, and they're selling these in 3 different sizes. All of the total lengths are the same. They are all 56 inches long, but the heights are different. And they're also selling these for a pretty nice price. The 16-inch panels are $114. The 24-inch panels are $130, and then the 32-inch panels are $150 for a set. Now you may be thinking, okay, that's really not too terrible. I mean, $150 for this type of decor. But let me tell you how to make even the largest set for less than 10 bucks. All right, so if you are a pallet person, this is going to be a perfect pallet wood project because you'll have less distressing to do. But for this situation, let's go ahead and say that you're not. You're going to have to buy the material. The irony is, I would actually use fence pickets to build this, of course. And to show you just how easy these things are to make, I made a small panel just as a demonstration. So here's my version, just using the scrap paint that I had laying around. And I also decided for mine, instead of all the pickets being the same height, that I would actually make some short ones and throw in there. But again, this is just an example of what you can do. So I'll get into the actual distressing and the coloring here in a minute. Let's go over the sizes of these boards real quick. Given the total length, divide that by 3. It tells me that each one of these panels are close to 19 inches wide. And if the gaps that are in between each one of these 5 pickets are an inch wide apiece, that means that the pickets themselves will be right around 3 inches wide. And really, you can use any type of material for this. Doesn't have to be a picket, doesn't have to be pallet wood. It just needs to fit this width. But if you are using a fence picket, they're only 5.5 inches wide. So we can't get 2 3-inch boards out of one picket. So let's bring it down a little bit. Let's split that picket in half and use 2 3/4-inch material. Then you have 2 boards that are 2 3/4 inches wide by 72 inches long. So I'm going to use the 16-inch version and a fence picket just as an example. I'll take 2 fence pickets, I'll rip those down the middle. I'll cut 15 parts that are 16 inches long. Then I'll add these 45 or 50-degree tips to each board. And there you have your pickets. And the only difference would be for the medium and the large one, you would actually be ripping down 4 fence pickets instead of the 2. But still, that's going to keep you within your price range because I just used the $2 cheap pine pickets. There's no need in buying cedar or anything like that for this build because you're going to be painting it. And now we're going to get to our distressing. And I did mine just a little bit different than what they did with theirs. And this style of distressing is actually really fun because you really can't mess it up. You just take whatever odd colored paints that you have laying around, and essentially you're just stacking paint on top of paint. Also, just take some random objects you paint over to make little square spots where the color will pop out and leave some of it natural. This is the fun part, this is the creative part, and you cannot mess it up. So once I have my paint on there, I let it dry. Lightly hit it with a sander just to blend some of those colors and fade out some of those edges. And then I went over the top with a dark stain and wiped it off. And that's just going to give it these dull colors instead of like super bright colors. And next, get creative with your distressing. You notice how on theirs, there's like odd scratchings and odd puncture patterns and things like that. And that's because most likely this is actually built out of pallet wood. But there's a million different ways to replicate this. Like you notice what I did here. I'd actually sprayed over a truss strap, and then I just took a nail, poked a few holes in that, the center board here. So all I did was take a strip of roofing nails that go into a roofing gun, laid it on my board, and hit the top with a hammer. It put all those little holes in there. And that's the cool part about this build, is that you can use anything. The more rustic, the more vintage that you get with this, the better. But the painting and distressing does not take long at all, so don't get hung up on that. So once you have all of your boards painted and distressed, it's time to connect them. Let's go ahead and take what's left of our 2 3/4 inch material. I'll go ahead and rip it down to 2 inches. You'll be needing 6 of those boards that are 18 inches long. So then you'll take 5 of your fence pickets, lay them face down. We'll put about a 3/4 or 1 inch spacing, whatever you prefer, in between each board. And next, that's all we'll do is just attach the back boards that we just cut. It looks like it's about 4 inches from the bottom and 4 inches from the top. Use wood glue and brad nails. That panel is done. Repeat for the next 2 panels. Now, to connect these panels together, that's all that they've used here are butt hinges, and they are cheap. You can actually pick these up on Amazon if you buy them in bulk. They're only like 50 cents a piece, and you can paint those any color that you would like. And that's all that there is to it. So what they are selling for $150, even with the hinges, you can still make it for less than $10. And that's just assuming that you have random old paint laying around. If you have to buy different color paints, you have to factor that in. But anytime I catch random color paint like this on sale, I pick it up because I know that there will be something that I'll need it for. And one last thing to point out, let's say that you're making a 16-inch picket and you don't have a 16-inch piece left. Do not cut a new board. Do something like this. So all that I did was attach it together with a piece of scrap wood, and you can see that they've done the exact same thing with theirs using like a splining jig or something, but they did not waste any material. I'm not going to just put this into a fall category because it's not. This item will sell year round, which makes it evergreen, and those are the types of items that you want in your arsenal. And if you're still with me at this point and you like these types of videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That is one way that I can tell what types of videos that people like, so I can make more of them. Okay, so this next one I thought was super cool idea. I have not seen this before, and they are calling these plank pumpkin sitters. They'll make these in 3 different sizes. I'm going to focus on the large one. You'll do the exact same steps, but then you'll just go down a few inches in size for the other 2. So this large one is 11 inches wide by 9 inches tall. Now for theirs, they're using 3/4 of an inch material. And I actually like this idea so much, I decided to make my own version. The only thing that I did not like was how thin the material was. Again, this looks like it's about 3/4 of an inch thick. I decided to go with this chunky style. Now, this is just my version of this. If you do not like this color scheme, that is completely fine. It would look awesome, just like this, with like a black undercoat and a white top. So let me tell you how they made these and how I made this one. I figured that someone would ask for the plans for something like this, but for all 3 sizes, which is essentially just going to be a series of templates because these 2 boards are identical. So I went ahead and made some up. So if you're interested in something like that, I'll throw the plans in my Etsy shop, but you do not need them because these things are simple to make. Okay, so you know I like to give demos of things as I'm explaining how to do it, but regardless of the thickness of the material that you decide to use, the steps are going to be the exact same. So what they have done here for their large one, they've taken 3/4 inch material, cut 2 boards into a 9 by 11 rectangle. So we're just going to pretend that this is the 9 by 11. And then to start with, they're going to measure over and down 1.5 inches to 2 inches on every single corner, and then they will draw a 45 across each corner. Once you have your 45s marked, go ahead and make those cuts. And then that's going to leave you with something that looks similar to this. I made this one a little more square than rectangle, but you get the point. 45, 45, 45, and 45. You need 2 of these. And then the next step is whatever height that this is. So since the one that we are going off of is 11 inches tall, you'll find your center point between the 2 45s. You'll measure down half the distance of the length. So in this case, it's going to be 5.5 inches. Now this is where the thickness of the material is going to come into play. For this example, this material is only 1/2 of an inch thick. Their material is 3/4 of an inch thick. So the next step is going to be using your center point, cut a notch the same thickness of the material that you're using to the halfway point, or in this case, the 5.5 inch point that we have found. So for this example, the notch is 1/2 of an inch wide. For what they made, they used 3/4 material, so their notch will be 3/4 of an inch. And for something like this, what I made, I used an 1.5 inch material. So my notch was 1.5 inches wide. And to make all of these cuts, including the notch, even on this thick material, and that's all that I used was a jigsaw. But once your notches are cut on both boards, you will have something that looks like this. Go ahead and sand and clean this up. Then you'll take the matching piece, again, we're going to play pretend here, and just slide the 2 notches into each other. So you can see on this thicker one, we had the notch here, the notch here. So on this board, the notch is at the top and goes up, and they just interlock. And that is pretty much it. Throw a little wood glue in there, you're set. And for the tops, Check this out. I literally went outside of my shop, found a dead branch, cut it off, glued it onto here, and then found some old vine. I probably have poison ivy, who knows, but found some old vine and wrapped it around here and glued it on. If you do not have this vine, you can use like some burlap or something like that, or just pick up an old wreath somewhere. The whole thing is made out of vines. But what makes these things super cool is that they are so easy to make. They are pricing their 3/4 inch plank pumpkins between $22 and $26 a piece, depending on the size. And if you decide that you would like to build one a little thicker like this, I used a 2x10, which is actually 9 1/4. 8-foot 2x10s in my area right now are $9.90. So essentially you can build 4 of these. I can make a large one of these for $2.50. I don't think that I'd have any trouble at all getting $20 a piece for these. Or if you make the entire set, they're wanting somewhere around 75 bucks. I think that you could easily move these things for 40 or 45 bucks a set. So for this next one, the reason why it caught my eye was because it was $32 on sale, and it almost has this 3-dimensional look. So by adding another layer to this, they actually made it stand out. And the other thing that caught my eye about this was how cheap it would be for us to make this. So this fall harvest decor, you see how they did that? They actually called this fall harvest, which I love it. But anyway, this wooden pumpkin is 11 inches wide by 12 inches tall and only 3/4 of an inch thick. But that's 3/4 on the base layer as well as the top strips. So what I'm going to use for this is 3 different boards. So they actually use 3 boards as well. So I'm going to take a $2 fence picket or pallet wood if you have it, and then I'm going to rip it down to a 4-inch width, and I'm going to cut 3 parts that are 12 inches long. Now you can take those 3 parts and you can actually glue those together and wait for that to dry, or you can do what they did. That is going to be the easiest way to hold this together. Plus the front strips, once you put those on, that's going to be holding it together from the front. So what I would do if I used a fence picket, you're going to have an 1.5 inch strip left that you cut off. I'm going to use that as the back strips. So you just lay your 3 boards down flat, butt that together, cut 2 pieces of that 1.5 inch board at 12 inches, add wood glue, and then I would actually brad nail those in, one near the top and one near the bottom. Now this will actually be the back of the pumpkin. And before we actually add the top strips, let's go ahead and cut out this shape. Now if you notice, there is nothing uniform about this shape. You want the rustic farmhouse look, the primitive handmade look. So before you even say, oh, I can't cut out this pumpkin, yes, you can, because you do not have to be an artist to draw this. So let's just say that this is your 3 boards. You're literally just going to be taking a jigsaw, cutting off these sharp angles kind of freehand. When you get to the top where the stem is, you'll want to mark center, and then you'll just cut, something like this. See? Doesn't have to be perfect, but once this is stained, it's going to look awesome. And speaking of stain, once all of this is cut out, go ahead and stain the whole thing kind of a medium brown. Again, if you're using Minwax, I like Early American, but it really doesn't matter what brand you use as long as you get this dark brown look. And while you're staining that, let's go ahead and stain the material that you're going to be using to make these top strips. Just take a scrap piece of your fence picket, go ahead and stain all of this brown as well. Then once that dries, let's go ahead and cut out these top pieces. Again, look at these shapes. There's nothing special about these shapes. You really cannot mess this up. Give it kind of a square, blocky look. You want each one of these corners to stand out. That's what gives it this interesting look. You're not looking for the lines to flow. So I've actually cut one out just to kind of show you how easy that it is. I used a jigsaw for this and just sanded the corners over. And this is what it would have looked like before I cut it out. The next one, you can actually go over the top and cut it out. So that's where you get your smaller ones that are on the inside and then the larger ones that are on the outside. So once you have all of your slats cut, it's kind of weird calling these things slats. I do not know what else to call these things. If you have any idea, drop it into the comments. I mean, they look like little boomerangs or something, but I'm going to call them slats because I can't think of anything else. So once you have all of your slats cut, let's go ahead and hit any part that we've cut with stain. That way everything matches underneath. Then attach these to our base using wood glue and brad nails. Next, just pick your paint color of choice and dry brush this on, but just dip it down a little bit of paint, making sure to let some of the brown underneath to come out. And then once that dries, if you want to really critique your distressing, just lightly sand down some of the corners to let some of that brown pop through. Grass bow tie thing that they put at the top, but just anything to add a little decoration, and you're done. You're selling these things for $32 a piece, and you can get several out of one fence picket. Sell them as a set. You already have everything out. Small, medium, large. Throw $50 on a whole set. Or if you just want to make this large one like this, 20, 25 bucks, you're going to sell them. All right, so this next one, this is another pumpkin sitter. Super, super easy to build. So before I actually get into breaking this down, just a reminder, our Patreon community is growing like crazy. If you're interested in more of like a personal community, behind the scenes content, Q&A, I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. So let's break down this build. Okay, so they're calling this a block sitter. So what caught my eye about this one is it's 1.5 inch thick. It comes in 3 different sizes, and all of those sizes are denominations of 1.5. So the little 2x4 light in my head went off, and that's what these things are made out of. So they're made out of 2x4s, and they're asking what I would consider kind of high prices for, but obtainable. The large one they are wanting $50 a piece for. You can make 2 out of one 2x4. The medium sized ones, they are wanting $37 a piece, and you can make 3 out of one 2x4. And the small ones, they're wanting $32 a piece, and you can make 5 out of one 2x4. So needless to say, if you can kind of capture the market on these, they're going to be a moneymaker. All right, so how do they make it? You can almost just tell just by looking at it how they're made, but it's all 1.5 by 1.5 material. Take my 2x4, cut off that rounded edge, and then cut 2 1.5 by 1.5 strips out of that. Just FYI, if you want to know the sizes of each one of these, it's 9.5 by 7.5. The medium one is a 12 by 9, and the large one is 14.5 inches tall by 12 inches wide. So for this example, I'm just going to be using the dimensions for the large one. So it's 14.5 inches tall by 12 inches wide. 12 divided by 1.5 is going to be 8. So we're going to be needing 8 strips that are 14.5 inches long. And then we will glue those 8 strips up together just as a rectangle. And I've actually done this just kind of as an example. This is pretty much the base for this entire build. So once your block is dried, next thing we need to do is cut our angles. So for this large one, in each corner, I measured over 3 inches and down 3 inches. You can use a miter saw, jigsaw, circular saw, whatever that you would like, handsaw, to just cut this off. So once you get all of your 45s cut, the next step would be to paint. And this is going to be up to you. The farmhouse white distressed is in right now. It kind of goes well with like those fancy smashed looking pumpkins. I don't know what they're called either, but you know, like the white ornamental pumpkins that they want like $15 for. I need to be in the pumpkin business. Actually was in the pumpkin business at one point, but that's another story. So if you're going for that look, you would start off with a base coat of black paint. Again, I would just use the cheapest black spray paint that you could buy. Coat this thing over, let that dry, and then you would go over the top with your white paint. But once all of that dries and sets, you'd lightly hit it with sandpaper to allow the black to come out in certain areas. And after your glue up, I wouldn't worry about sanding this. You may have some small lips and things like that, but that's actually going to help whenever you go to distress this at getting this dark line to look like they have here. And then once your painting and distressing is done, that's all that they have used for the top is this. You all have branches, or you all have access to branches. I'm sure you can go on Amazon and buy branch pieces, but go outside, get some fresh air, get a little piece of branch, throw some CA glue or some wood glue on here, glue this baby on right at the top, and then just go around the edge with that whatever grass stuff that they put around the edge. Wrap that stuff around the top, or get creative. Actually go get some vine while you're outside. If you see some vine, as long as it's not poison ivy, rip that thing off the tree, wrap it around, dangle it down, whatever. But as easy as these things are to make, there's no reason why you should not be adding something like this to your fall lineup. And for this last one, I really haven't poked fun at the OPV in a while for selling like absolutely crazy things, but it's time. I found something whenever it came to the fall decor, and it's this stool. Okay, so I've sat on a lot of stools. I've made a lot of stools. That's not a stool. That's a log. And not only is it a log, that is a naked log. Okay? Somebody took the bark off of it. That's about it. And the crazy thing is not really that these companies are selling logs. It's that the 11-inch log that is 17 inches tall, that I have plenty of those right out of my firewood pile, is selling for $400 a piece. Now let's look at the big one. Okay, that was a small one. The 18-inch stool, that is 17 inches tall, so same height, 18-inch diameter, is $800 for a naked log, firewood. So all jokes aside, people are actually buying these things. So check out your firewood pile. You actually need this material to be dry. Strip off the bark, sand it down, and for something like this, I would actually pour epoxy over the top. It's self-leveling. Go ahead and just take a brush, move it into all the little crevices and things like that. Just kind of set it up to drip off. The hardest part about a log this size is actually getting a perfectly square cut. So I would actually put furniture levelers on the bottom. They're super cheap, and you can actually inset those and make those super easy to hide. So if you want to go into the log stool business, there you go. Have to break back in. I thought we were done with the whole log thing, but check this out. This is the stem from the little pumpkin thing. What does that look like? It looks like a log stool. All right. Dollhouse log stool, or squirrel log stool. Anyway, okay, so this first one that I'm going to talk about, they are calling wooden boot storage. All right, so the name for this may need a little help, but the concept is a great idea. And what makes this a great idea is that it is solving a problem. Again, people will spend money on things that solve problems, and boot storage is a problem. And they are wanting $65 for this thing that is simple to build, and you can build it for dirt cheap. So the one that they have shown here, there's actually only 3 different parts to this. So you have the base, which is 9 3/4 inches wide by 21.5 inches long. For me, I would just use a common square edged 2x10, and then just make sure that the bottom is flat. It looks like that they use 3/4 or 1 inch material, but for boots, I would think that you'd want a little bit more weight. And then the only other thing that they've used is dowel rods. So this is either 7/8 or 1 inch dowel rod. Either would be fine, but the ones in the front, those are 13 inches long. And the ones in the back, those are 18 inches long. That's all that they have done is put 2-inch spacing between each one of these dowel rods, drilled holes halfway through the base, and then they want you to assemble this at home just by sliding your dowel into the hole and putting a screw in from the bottom. If you are going to ship something like this, or you need to package it up, let's say to take it to a market or something like that, that is an excellent way to save some space. If not, I would go ahead and throw some wood glue around there as well. It never hurts. But the one thing that I would definitely change is the spacing. So we can make this just a little bit longer. Instead of using 2-inch spacing, let's do like a 3-inch space in between. Because look at the boots that they have on display here. Okay, so these are slim boots to start with, and they're going to have trouble fitting another set of boots on the dowels that are beside the boots that are displayed. So what I would suggest is drill down for your very first one in the corner, and then actually take a boot and put on that, and then check out the spacing to actually see how much room that you need between each dowel. So besides being a cool concept, it's not a new concept. These types of holders have been around for years. The difference is their marketing. It's definitely not the quality, because you can actually see in this picture where the dowels are either bowed in, or whenever they were drilling their holes, they actually drilled the hole crooked. Just don't do that. And if you do, don't sell someone your mistake, because like we have talked about before, your product is a reflection of your name. Okay, so back to the marketing part of this. They're calling this a burnt wood construction. Okay, so I know what they've done here. You know what they've done here, but it has nothing to do with the construction of this. So what I would do to get this look for the base is go ahead and get it sanded, get it routed. If you would like to put a routed edge, this one looks like that they just put a tapered edge. You can do that with a table saw or a circular saw, or if you just wanted to round the edges, it would still look fine. But get it sanded down the way that you would like, and pull this little baby out. We've all seen it done before. They're just lightly burning this wood to cause the grain to pop like this, and it gives it a pretty cool look. Everything about this build is super simple to do, and I definitely think that it would sell. It's just an all-around useful item that if you stage this up and market it correctly, you have no trouble at all moving these things. Okay, so for this next one, yes, it's a cool build, but what caught my eye about this was the price and how many stores were actually selling the exact same thing. Whenever you see all the major big box stores selling something, that means it is hot. So these rustic wood pine trees, I've seen sets of 2 go from $188 to $280. Yes, these things are super cool. Yes, they're super easy to build. And I'm going to show you how to build one of these out of 1 fence picket. All right, so check it out. 1 fence picket. And the great thing is, with this design, you don't have to do any sanding. So all of this stuff that we would normally sand down or plane down or whatever for our picket builds, you do not have to do it for this one, because this look is obviously what people are wanting. So although this is a simple build, if you are a plans in the hand type of person, then head over to the Etsy shop. I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. So let me tell you how I built this. So I started off by taking my fence picket and cutting 7.5 inches off the end. And that's going to be used for this bottom triangle. Once I had that 7.5 inches, I ripped this board down to 3.5 inches and then added 45-degree miters on each side. You'll end up with what I'm calling a filler board here on the bottom. And then the next thing that you need to do is head over to the table saw and rip what's left of your picket down to 2.5 inch strips. We'll be using that size for the rest of this build. Once you have your 2 strips cut, let's cut one that is 25.5 inches for your back support. Then you'll need 2 boards that are 8 inches long and 2 boards that are 7.5 inches long for your base. So starting with an 8-inch board for your base, you install that flush with the edge of the support on both sides. So both of these are 8-inch. And then with our 2 8-inch boards installed, we'll install our 7.5-inch boards going in the opposite direction. And it'll look something like this. So once you have your base installed to your support, now we can go ahead and attach our different limbs. So the first thing that I'm going to do is install this bottom board that we've already cut 9 inches up from the very bottom. And then with this installed, we can work off of it for the rest of our limbs. So if you notice, we almost have a herringbone pattern here. They're just butt joints all the way up. So in order to get 15 inches wide at the base, one side of this herringbone design will be shorter than the other side. So the long board closest to the bottom is 10 3/4 of an inch long. And for every limb that you cut, you will have one cut at 90 degrees and the opposite side cut at 45 degrees. Any measurement that I'm about to tell you will be from the square edge to the tip of the 45. So the long board on the bottom row is going to be 10 3/4 of an inch long, and the shorter board is going to be 7 3/4 of an inch. And then for the next row, the only difference is we're going to take off a 1/2 of an inch from the previous row. So the long board for the second row is going to be 9 3/4, and the short board for the second is going to be 7 1/4. And then for every row after that, we'll just keep reducing the length by 1/2 of an inch. And you don't have to stop at 4 rows. You can make this taller. Let's make sure that the base is wide enough to support the height. And if you wanted to make a set of these like they did, which is not a bad idea, they are the exact same width. It's just for the smaller one, they've left off the top branches. It's as easy as that. And for assembly, that's all that I use is wood glue and brad nails. So let's say that I wanted to make the same set that they are selling from $188 to $280. Essentially, I could build that set out of pine for $4 in material. Or if you wanted to go with cedar, it would be closer to $8. But even at $8, there's a ton of profit to be made with these things. And do not forget to shake things up. Add your own twist. Since these things are so cheap and easy to make, do not just make these in this natural color. These things would look awesome whitewashed and then sanded off a little bit. Or alternating colors for the different limbs. There's a ton of different color options that will work for this build. So make sure that whenever you're marketing these things, that you show several different colors in several different settings. That way that the customer can actually visualize where it's going to look best in their house or on their porch, and you're going to make some sales. So have you noticed, like most channels, I do not have a lot of paid advertising in the middle of my videos, as I personally don't like watching them and I don't like doing them. But as content creators, they're oftentimes necessary to allow us to do what we do. But one of the huge things for this channel that helps to keep me from doing in-video ads is the support from our Patreon community. So if we can keep growing that community, not only will you not have to listen to me talk about some magic hair growth formula or whatever, but it'll also allow me more time and focus to put back into the community. I'd much rather spend my time supporting those that support me than creating 60-second commercials for big corporations. But that's just me. So if the Patreon community is something that you may be interested in, check it out. I'll make sure to throw a link in the description. Okay, so for this next one, it caught my eye because it is unique. The P1 is calling this a retro freestanding bookshelf. Okay, so looks pretty cool. So not only does this item look awesome, but it look great in any color. Like right now, I'm picturing this with the white shelves with maybe a black base and a black back. And that's the great thing about building these things yourself, is that you're not limited to what the stores sell. You can put your own twist to it and come up with something that is even better than the big box stores are trying to sell. But this one that they are selling is 9.5 inches deep, it's 20 inches wide, and it's 45 inches tall. So how did they build this? Starting with the base, it's 1.5 inches thick by 9.5 inches wide. Again, I would use a 2x10, which is going to be 9 1/4, 9.5 inches wide. But whatever the width of your base is, all of the shelves need to be the same width. And then for the backing, it's actually a wider piece of material. It did not say they most likely used a piece of plywood or MDF or something like that. But if you're going to stick with solid wood, you could use a 1x12. And the whole purpose of this backing is to provide support for all of these different shelves. So for the shelves, each one of these shelves are the exact same length as the base. We know our base is 20 inches, so let's make our shelves 20 inches. And again, if you're wanting to use solid wood for this, I would look at 3/4 inch by 10 inch wide pine shelving boards. Okay, so you know how I like to make little examples of things that I'm trying to explain, but essentially this is how they did it, except without the backing for now. So although almost every single part of this is at an angle, there's actually only one angle cut. That's what makes this project so simple. Your only angle cut will be your very first board, and it's going to be cut at a 45-degree angle. If it's too wide to fit your miter saw, this can easily be done with a circular saw. But once you have your first board cut, you would install that about 1/3 of the way in of the total length of your base. For this larger build, I would go ahead and use wood glue, attach this from the bottom with screws, and then I would assemble the rest of this project laying flat. That way you don't have the weight of the entire build pulling on this one point, because we do not have our backboard on yet. So with everything laying flat, all the rest of the pieces that you will need will be 20-inch pieces of the same board, and all be put together with butt joints. So we would just find the center of our first board, mark that, install our second board, and then find the center of that board and keep going for how many ever tiers that you would actually like to make this. And you come up with something like this. Okay, so the only thing that it's missing is the backing. While it's laying flat, I would install your backboard, making sure that it goes all the way up to the top. Because remember, this is going to be your support system for all of these different shelves. Then pre-drill and use some wood glue and attach this backing to each one of these shelf levels as well as the base. This will tie all of this in together, making this bookshelf super sturdy. And you can see in this picture where they put screws in from the back of the shelf to help support every level that goes up. So they want $170 for this thing, and they guarantee that you can put this together in less than 25 minutes. So that means that they haven't used any wood glue or anything. It's just gonna be flat packed and shipped out. But $170 for this kind of bookshelf, I honestly don't think it's terrible. Will you have a hard time moving it for that price? Probably. For me in my area, and I'd put my own twist to it, I would try to move these for around $120 to $140 range. And this next one caught my eye because it would be a perfect pallet wood project and be super simple to build. It's a hanging mail organizer and key holder. Almost everything on here can be built out of a pallet. Okay, so for the backing, that's all that is 2x4s. They've taken 3 2x4s that are 18 inches long and they've connected these together from the back just using a piece of scrap wood, glue, and brad nails. Looks like that the strips that they use to connect these in the back are about 1/2 of an inch thick. I'd make sure to put one about 6 inches down from the top and 6 inches up from the bottom. And then for the 2 side boards on the inside, those are 2x4s as well. They've just been ripped down to 2 inches thick and cut 9 inches long. And then to install those, I'd use wood glue, place those in the center of your edges, and put some screws in from the back. The bottom board of this little box actually creates a little lip in the front. It looks like that it's about 5 inches wide. So then you would just need to connect that to your 2 side arms. And again, from the bottom, just use some wood glue, screws, or brad nails. And then the front. This is actually a little board for chalk. So if you needed to write yourself a little reminder or whatever, you could do that. So all that they have done is taken a piece of 1/4 inch plywood, put some chalk paint on it. Once that's dried, nail that baby into place, throw on a few coat hooks at the bottom, and you're done. It's as simple as that. Again, this is another item that's so easy and cheap to build. I would do it in several different colors. They're getting $45 a piece for these things as is, and if staged and marketed correctly, I don't think that you would have any issue getting that yourself. Okay, so for this next one, it's not the item itself that caught my eye. It was the technique on how they made it. It is this chopping board. Okay, so I'm not saying go out and make these. I really don't know how well these things will sell. I did notice that instead of marketing this as a cutting board, it is a chopping board. That's because it has the raised edges. So when I first looked at it, I thought, well, this would be easy. You know, you can just cut this shape out and use a router to plunge down into the middle and cut that out. Well, then I noticed a little line at the bottom of this thing. Check this out. Okay, so this is actually 2 pieces, which is going to make it even easier. You don't even have to use a router. You can make this with a jigsaw. Okay, so use your imagination here, okay? 2 pieces. So that's all that they have done is taken their 2 pieces, they've clamped them together or whatever, cut their shape, whatever shape that you want to make your chopping board, but they've cut their shape out, kept one solid piece as the bottom. Okay, so that's it for that one. And then for your second one, again, this is cut to shape. They have actually cut all the way through and left about 1/2 of an inch around the outside. That's all they did was glue it back to the original flat piece. That is a piece of pie. Let's say for this one, you can cut your outside design with a jigsaw, drill a hole in the center of this that's wider than your jigsaw blade, and then actually jigsaw out the inside of this as well. And a little bit of glue, you have a chopping block. I just thought I would share this because it's the first time I've ever noticed anyone using this technique, and it's not a bad one. And that is going to be this spiral Christmas tree. So last year I taught you guys how to make the different spiral trees, and they were a hit. Make sure to check that out because people have sold those all year long. And what I noticed in my research is that spiral types of trees like this one are super hot this year. They're on all the big box stores' websites and in all kinds of different styles. So let's start with this one that is made out of dowel rods. Okay, so this is actually a really cool idea. Let's break it down. I'm just going to call these dowel rod trees, but they come in 3 different sizes, and this set of 3 is $163. This thing would be super simple to build. So the dimensions for the 3 different sizes, we have the small one, which is 9 inches wide by 18 inches tall. We have the medium, which is 12 inches wide by 22 inches tall. And then the largest one is 15 inches wide by 27 inches tall. So I'm just going to break down this small one because they are all built the same, with the exception of how many limbs that they actually have. The small has 9, the medium has 12, and the large one has 15. And then the only other difference is going to be the length of our starting dowel, which is going to be the bottom one. Okay, so for all three sizes, that's all that they have used for the limbs for these trees are 3/4 of an inch dowel rods. The little wooden balls that are in between, don't even try to make those. Just order those from Amazon. They'll come pre-drilled with a hole in the center for dirt cheap. The only thing that I would do to change up these wooden balls would be to widen the hole that it comes with. I think most of these come with a 1/4 of an inch hole. I would go ahead and widen that out to 3/8. Why 3/8? Because a 3/8 dowel rod is what I would use to run through the center of all of this. You could test this out with a 1/4 of an inch dowel rod, but to me it may be a bit flimsy. Or if you did not want to use a dowel rod, you could use a piece of 1/4 inch thread stock. It'll be a lot more sturdy, but it'll cost you a little bit more. Okay, so all that they have done to get the shape of the tree is start with the longest one. So for the small one, it's going to be 9 inches long. And then for every limb level up, you are going to subtract 1 inch and 1/8. And then you'll just keep repeating this all the way until you get to the very top. And that's going to give you your perfect little Christmas tree look. Wooden balls that they're putting in between, that's what's going to allow them to actually spin if you want the twisted look, or you can keep them straight and they look great like that as well. They have put a little metal decorative star at the top. Again, you can pick those up off of Amazon. For the base of this, they've taken a piece of wood and cut it into a round, and they put a thicker spacer on top of that. I don't think that that's needed, but if you like that look, then you would just go up to a larger dowel size, or you can get the wooden closet rods. It looks like it'd be about the same size as that. If you wanted to make this round base, that's all that you would need to do is take something that is 1.5 inches thick, draw the size of the circle that you would like on that, and you can cut that out with a jigsaw. They have this round over look. You can do that with a router, or you can actually do that with a palm sander. The little half balls that they're using for decoration around the edges, you can pick those up on Amazon as well. I think that they're like 300 pieces for $10. But the reason why that they have done all of this, the round base, the half rounds around the bottom, is to keep that round, smooth look for this whole piece. There isn't any sharp edges or anything like that. Another neat alternative to what they're using as a base would just be an end cut off of a log. You know, the firewood stuff that I make fun of all the time. It actually come in really neat here and kind of match this design. Then as far as putting all of this together, you would need to drill holes in your dowel rods. So I would just line them all up into your tree shape, mark a line down the very center, and then draw a hole through that, the same size of the rod that you're going to be using to support all of this. Once you have holes in your dowels, I would just put your support rod into your base and then start stacking all of this stuff on. And then the only other thing that they've done to top this off is the very ends of each one of these dowels, they're painted white. So you can either dip it down in some white paint, or you can bundle it all together and spray paint the end white. Either way, it gives it a pretty cool look. And this is a build that pretty much anyone can do and not have any issues at all selling these things. Okay, so this next one is from the old PB, and they are at it again with this super simple design, and they are calling it a footed tray. Okay, it's a footed tray. Now it's a board with 2 more boards underneath. Let's get creative. If you decide to make something like this, which I think that you should, because it is super simple design, sometimes simple is easier, but not when it comes to the name and marketing an item. But they just wanted to get the word tray in this item because trays are hot right now. That way that it would pop up on search engines and things like that when somebody types in wooden tray. But basically this is more like a riser. So this would go like on the middle of a table or on a counter, things like that. Yes, you could put things on it and actually use it as a tray and carry it to the table. Most of the time people are just going to use this to create height or dimension. And the cool thing is that you could build these to use indoor or outdoor. But this tray is 2¼ inches thick. That's including the leg strips. It is 9 inches wide by 14 inches long, and they are wanting $70 for this thing. To me, it looks like an end cut with a couple pieces of square stock glued to the bottom of it. But the simplicity of this design is what makes it neat. So this would be the perfect thing to make if you have all of those end cuts laying around. If you're anything like me, and I know that you are whenever it comes to throwing away things, we're not throwing away end cuts, okay? We can use it for something. This is that something if it's 9 inches wide, okay? It doesn't have to be 14 inches long. You can still put these 2 bottom strips on and sell that piece of scrap. If you do not have any wider scrap, you can glue this up. And regardless of whether it's a single piece or a glue piece, that's all that you would do, sand this thing down, clean it up really nice. So based on the dimensions of the whole piece, the legs themselves are 1¼ by 1¼ They don't have to be that size. They can be 1 by 1 or 3/4 by 3/4. Whatever works for you. But all that they have done is cut 2 dados in the bottom of this board. And it looks like they put those 2 or 3 inches from each end. And again, like we've talked about before, if you do not have a dado stack, you can easily do this on a table saw or with your miter saw if you have a depth stop. If you're doing it on the table saw, raise your blade up to 1/4 inch, make that cut, then move the fence over the thickness of your blade, make that cut, and repeat this until you have a notch cut out that is the width of your legs. And for the leg stock itself, it is the same thickness as the tray. And most likely they have just trimmed these off the edges of the exact same board just to keep things easy. And then to attach these into the notch, that's all that they have used is wood glue. For me, I put the tray upside down, put some wood glue in there, pre-drill, counterbore, and then drop a couple screws in just for some extra strength. Regardless of what you decide to do or how to build this is super easy and they will sell. And if you're still with me at this point and you think that I have earned it, make sure to hit my logo in the bottom right-hand corner to subscribe. Okay, so mark my words, this next one is going to be a hit. Why? Because it's super cool, it's in right now, and it looks complicated. This thing is not complicated to make. And once you have your templates, it would be a piece of pie to mass produce these things. And besides being super cool and its sales potential, I figured out how to make one of these that is 3 foot tall using one fence picket and a piece of dowel rod. So your total cost to make one of these is going to be a few bucks. They are charging $80 for the small one, $100 for the medium size, and brace yourself, $250 for the large one. Okay, so this large one is 4 foot tall. The one that I'm about to teach you how to build, that's all that you would have to do to make these different sizes is to change the lengths of your limbs. And this is the one that I came up with. I have less than $5 in material in this thing. I think it's pretty sweet, and it even spins. Okay, so let me tell you how I made this, and don't start freaking out whenever you see the curves and things like that for these limbs. But that is what makes this unique. And that is what's going to keep people from trying to make these to sell. Just these curves. That's enough to keep people away and keep your competition down. And like I said at the beginning, I'm about to teach you step by step on how to make this large adjustable limb tree. But like always, if you are a plans in the hand type of person, or you're simply not comfortable freehanding these limbs, then head over to my Etsy shop. I'll have plans there for all 3 sizes that include the templates for each one of these limbs. I'll make sure to throw the link for that in the description. So I started off with a 6 foot fence picket and this 3/8 dowel rod. The first thing that I did was make my base. And that's all that I did was cut 2 boards off the square end of the picket. One of those is 12 inches long, the other one is 8 inches long. Fasten those 2 boards together using some wood glue and some brad nails from the bottom. And in the very center, I drilled a 3/8 hole to hold my dowel rod. I then cut my dowel rod to 34 inches long and then installed it into the base. Once that was dry, I went ahead and just painted it black. You can paint it whatever color that you like, or you can leave it natural. All right, so now let's talk about these limbs, okay? Yes, they look complicated to make, but they are not at all. So one thing to notice before I show you how I did it is that the bottom 5 limbs are all shaped the same. And then the top 6, as they get smaller in length, they're all shaped the same. So this is a bottom limb, and you see how it kind of curves up, but it also has the curve in the bottom. As you get to the top limbs, you'll notice that the curve in the bottom is no longer there. All right, to start designing these limbs, this is how I set it out. You'll need a big piece of paper or a piece of cardboard. I knew that my bottom limb was 20 inches wide, so I drew a 20-inch line here. Then the main section of the tree was 28 inches tall, so I drew a line in the center that is 28 inches long. And then the very last limb is 4¼ inches long, so I marked that up at the top. That's all that I had to do was connect the outside edges, and it made my Christmas tree shape. I knew that there would be 1 inch between each limb, so that's where you see these little squigglies here. That's 1 inch markings. And then for the actual limb spacing, I started with 2¼ inch spacing and gradually worked that spacing down to 1 inch at the very top. So by having it laid out like this, I knew exactly how much room that I had for each limb and how long that they needed to be. And I know that you're probably wondering about the curve. So I know for the second one, I want kind of a little flat spot here on the top, and I want my tip to arch up. So I'm going to kind of match what I did for the first one. And then the bottom of my arch, I'm going to have it to come up to about here. And this does not have to be perfect at all. Then I'll just put a screw in at each one of those points. Now that's all you need is a piece of flexible scrap wood. And this is a super easy way to create arches. And for the bottom, I want it to arch down. And then you could do the same thing all the way up, just on one side. Fold this piece of paper or your cardboard in half at your center line, and then cut that out and it will mirror this shape. Making your templates is as simple as that. And they do not have to look just like these. The most important thing is their length. That's why you need to draw out that tree shape. You want these to actually look like a tree whenever you put them together. So once I had those limb templates done, I just laid those out on my fence picket and traced them. And then the little star at the top, I just drew that out onto my fence picket as well. And then once I had all of my parts onto my picket, I just used a jigsaw. I put a scroll blade in it. I've showed you those before. And then I cut out all of these pieces using a jigsaw. Yes, if you have a bandsaw, it will go faster. And if you want to make multiple of these, you could stack several fence pickets on top of each other and cut several parts out at once. But I chose to use a jigsaw just to prove a point that there's no excuses on making something like this. So with all the parts cut, I lined them all up, drew a line down the center, and then drilled a 3/8 hole in the center of each one. As far as the spacing goes, I put all of my pieces on, and from the back, pre-drilled a little hole measured 1 inch between each limb, and installed a brass tack. This will allow it to slide up and be able to twist. And it is as simple as that. One fence picket. This thing is awesome. I don't know how much that I could sell it for. I know that something very, very similar to this, they're trying to get $250 for. So definitely build these, test your area, because I guarantee it, these things will sell. You will have a waiting list. So what made me stop scrolling on this next one was the price tag. First I saw the price tag and then I saw the piece, and it's actually pretty cool, but I don't think that it's quite $4,500 cool. Yes, $4,500 for this piece of wall art. Now don't get me wrong, this thing is huge and heavy, but it's still a lot of money. This piece of art is 55 inches by 102 inches. So I'm not going to say make something like this. Don't make something this big. Now you can if you have the place to store or display it. But for me, I would scale it down to like a 4 foot by 4 foot. So what makes this piece interesting is that it's essentially old cutoffs or pieces of wood made to look old, put together using different sizes until it filled all the empty space. It's pretty cool, and it'd be perfect for that big pile of end cuts that you have over in the corner. But it does not have to look just like this. But I just use this as an example. So that's all that they've done is use 2x4s to make a frame. Then they painted a piece of plywood black and attached it to the back. And then that gave them the area that they needed to fill up. Looks like that there's a lot of mortise and notch holes in a lot of these parts. You could recreate that if you wanted and just stain the inside of it dark because it's on a dark board. And once they had all of their parts into places where everything kind of Legoed into place, they just glued everything down, and then I'll assume that they fastened it down some way from the back. So simple as that. Again, I'm not telling you to build one just like this, but something similar to this, something that's abstract, has different dimensions, it makes for an interesting piece of wall art where no two will be the same. And again, that's something else that people will spend money on. Something that's unique and one of a kind. Just an idea. Okay, so this last one, this one's going to be awesome. The OPB has done it again and impressed me, blew my socks off with this. It's a bunch of sticks tied together with a piece of rope to make it look kind of like a Christmas tree. And they're wanting $42 for those sticks that you raked up and threw in the fire pit. I guess they got tired of messing with, heavy firewood and just decided to use the limbs. I don't know, but they're selling these things. I actually have to read this because the title for this is so long. So they're calling this a natural brown frosted wood tree with star hanging Christmas decoration. It has nothing to do with the sticks tied with string, but that's the name of it. But this is actually pretty neat and another lesson in marketing because they are marketing this as abstract. So with it being marketed as an abstract item, it's not meant to be perfect. You're supposed to look past what it's made out of and actually see what it represents. It won't hurt to make one of these because you can pick up some sticks out of the yard and get some grass string and throw one of these babies together. Again, like the dowels, the only thing that you would have to do is kind of lay out that design. You tie your string as you go, or you could drill a hole through each level, run that in, tie a knot. The hardest thing about this whole limb tree would be the little star, and that's all that they've done is take even smaller pieces of a branch, broke it into equal length sections, hot glued it into a star, and maybe put some tacks around it. But anyway, I'm just showing you this because some people will love it. And again, that's what we do. We don't always make things that we like. We make things that someone would like. Plus, it's a good way to get rid of the branches in your yard. And if you have a lot of pine cones in your yard, check out the archives from one of last year's video where the OPB was selling pine cones on a stick. Who remembers that one? All right, so this first one, I'm going to consider it a medium-sized item, even though it would be just as simple to make as anything else that I've covered. And that is going to be the $240 coat rack from the OPB. And there's one thing that I noticed while doing the research for this video, is that coat racks are becoming very popular again. I actually found several different styles, but this is the one that I chose to break down because you could make this a couple of different ways and both of them are easy. So before you freak out about the legs on this, I'll explain to you a really easy way to get this look. So the base of this project is only made out of one board and 4 legs. This thing is 60 inches tall, and at the base where the legs span, that's 20 inches wide. So let's talk about the one board in the middle. So since the total height is 60 inches, and with the angles of the legs, which we'll go over in a minute, is taken into consideration, the actual board itself is only 4 foot long. And to me, it looks like that it's an actual full thickness 2x2. But really, it just depends on the look that you're going for. You can use a little thicker material or thinner. But the main thing about this build is that it needs to be stable, and all of that is going to come from the legs. So at this point, we're going to say that our base is a 4 foot 2x2. So now let's talk about those rounded legs. Based on the dimension and the span of the legs, they look to be about 16 inches long. Yes, if you have access to a lathe, you can knock these things out in no time. But if you don't, you can actually pick up a set of 4 rounded legs that look almost identical to this for only 20 bucks. Or if you do not want to go with the rounded legs at all, use the exact same stock that you use for your center base and make your legs out of that. It'd just be more of the square rustic look, whereas with these rounded legs, it's the modern rustic look. And if it were me, I would actually make both. Like we've talked about before, everyone is different. Everyone's houses are decorated differently. So give people options. And again, I cannot say this enough. It is not about what you like. It's about what the customer likes. So I'm going to say that you have chosen to use the round legs like this and you've just purchased them off of Amazon. So whenever you get these legs in, they're going to be 16 inches long. And it's going to come with some different hardware, but we're not going to be needing that because we're going to be needing a sharper angle than what the kit supplies. So when the legs come in, probably going to have a little bolt sticking out of the ends. Those are just double threaded bolts. Just take some pliers, unscrew those, but hang on to them because you may need them for another project. And then you'll need to put a 50-degree angle on the ends of each one of these. Now, how did I come up with 50 degrees? Well, just kind of playing around actually. I just took the span of the base that I wanted, which I wanted right around 22 inches. I took 2 pieces of scrap, angled them in on a flat surface until they were 22 inches apart, then just took another piece of scrap that is 2 inches wide, the same width as our center board, placed it in the center, and just marked one of my edges. Took it to the miter saw, found that edge, and it was 50 degrees. Yes, there are several different tools that you could use to find this, but this only took me about a minute, so work smarter, not harder. So now that we know that our angle is right around 50 degrees, it's going to look something like this. So to find the angle, I just use scrap wood and square stock, so if you want to actually make square legs, you just do the same thing. So now that we know that we need a 50-degree angle on each one of these legs, the next step is going to be to cut those. Most people are going to do this with a miter saw, but like anything else, there are several different ways that you can do it. But regardless of how you do it, you have to take into consideration that this is a tapered leg. So whenever you lay this against your fence to make a cut, the back is going to be smaller, so it will actually shift the piece of wood out of square and changing your angle. So to keep that from happening, that's all that you have to do is measure the width of the thickest part, which is the end that we're going to be cutting, and then shim out the back the same distance away from the fence. That is the same as the front of your leg. So now with the leg square against your fence, you're ready to cut your angle. So now with the angles cut on all of our legs, how are we going to attach these to our 2x2? Again, there's several different ways that you can do this, but I'll tell you how they did it. So if you look close at where the legs attach to the 2x2, it almost looks like that it's a little thicker at the bottom, like it's designed into the base. Well, it's not. So all that they have done is taken a 1/4 of an inch piece of plywood that is the same width as the board, 2 inches, taken the 50-degree angle and attached it just like this. By doing it this way, it keeps you from having to install any of your screws or nails at an angle. You can do it all from the back. So I would throw on some wood glue, pre-drill, and put 2 screws in this. That's going to make for a really solid leg, and this piece of plywood is going to add extra surface for glue. So then once you have that installed, I would just coat this with glue, measure up maybe 4 inches from the bottom of your center board, and then attach this to your center board using that wood glue and some brad nails. Once that wood glue dries, you're set. And then you would just repeat this for the other 3 legs. So once your legs are on, there's only one thing left to do, and that's going to be to add the hardware. I actually found a 6-pack of these on Amazon for less than 10 bucks. And once you get one of these on each side of the top, it's going to look pretty similar. And that's how simple that it would be to make one of these. Now for me, whenever I would get these legs in, I would sand that finish off, maybe darken it up a little bit, and make it look a little more rustic, but to each their own. Put your own style and twist to it. And as far as selling these things, 240 bucks is a little steep. You may be able to get that if you're using reclaimed wood and you're actually turning these legs down. If it were me and I was using new lumber, I'd probably shoot for closer to the $150 range. But again, that's just in my area. Every area is different. We've talked about this before. Things that would sell in my area for $150, you may be able to get $200 out of. And the only way that you can find out is to test the market. This next one I've actually found on tons of different sites, from your fancy furniture places to the actual big box stores. So before I show it to you, the cheapest place, and that was a big box store, we're selling this for $18 a piece, and I saw them all the way up to $30. Check this out. So they are calling this a vintage farmhouse bracket. I'm calling this a 2x4 that was made out of a branch that was only about 3 inches wide. I honestly believe that they are taking the 2x4s that they have called did not make the cut, and they are making these and selling a little piece of that 2x4 for $18 to $30. But anyway, since they were on several different sites, that means that people are buying these and they are popular. You know what to do with this. The board that goes against the wall is 10 inches long. The board that acts as the bracket is 8 inches long. So what they've done is cut 45-degree angles on those 2 boards, put a couple of screws in from the top because it's actually going to have a board on top of it. And then for the support bracket in the middle, I'm going to say that it's about 6 inches long with a 45-degree angle on each side. And to make this thing look rustic or look farmhouse, they have taken a framing nailer and toe-nailed in some nails to hold that into place. You can tell that it's been put in by a nailer, but the nails are actually inset into the wood. And then that's all that they have done is roughed it up some more. So the edges where the bark was showing, they really didn't have to do anything because that's on half the 2x4s you find anymore. But then they've taken hatchets and made some marks. You can actually see where they've used a screw just to lay onto the board, hammer that in, and put the screw marks in. Why a screw if they're wanting this to look rustic? I would have used a square nail instead of an actual screw, but to each their own. And then once all that was crudely put together, you can see the big gaps, you can see all of that, and it really doesn't matter because that's the theme, that's the look for this. But once that was together, they just slapped some paint on this, and all of this paint has been sprayed on. Why they picked some of these colors like this green one, I have no clue. But they are obviously selling these things. So altogether to build one of these, there's only 24 inches of 2x4. So that means out of an 8-foot stick, you can make 4 of these. So less than $1 a piece. They're selling these things for $18 to $30. I'm going to let you decide on what to price these at because I have no clue. I'd have to test the market and see what people are willing to pay. But the cool thing about this is if someone is going to buy one, you know that they're at least going to buy 2. And if they're planning on using this for a shelf, make sure that you take that scrap piece of 2x8 that you have laying over in the corner because it's all roached out and the edges are gone, and paint it up to match your brackets. And this next one caught my eye because it was relatively expensive and it was from Target. Or when you're trying to sell something like this for a high price, we'll call it Target, okay? Sounds a little more fancy. And obviously fancy name places get higher prices. So regardless of what you want to call the store, this is a pretty cool item. And you can build this out of fence pickets or pallet wood. So they're calling this a 3-pocket hanging file holder. So when you first look at this build, yes, it may look a little complicated, but it's not. If you really take a close look, there's really only 3 main elements to this. You have your frame that goes around the outside, you have your X brace that's in the center, and then you have your 3 fold down pockets. So this file holder is 15 inches wide by 33 inches long. So what I would do is start with the frame of this, the backing. And to me, it looks like it's all 2-inch material. And in the description of this item, it says that the wood is a 1/2 inch thick. But again, perfect for pickets or pallets. So we'll just start by cutting whatever material that you're deciding to use down to 2-inch strips, and then whatever length and width that you actually decide to build this. But let's say that you're going to build it similar to this. So you'll need 2 outside boards that are 33 inches long with 45-degree angles on each side, and then a top and bottom board 15 inches long, again with 45s on each end. And then we'll just put this together like we would a picture frame. And for me, I'd put it together with some pocket hole screws in the back. Super fast, super easy. So once you have the exterior frame built, we'll move on to this X design in the center. If you look at the corners of this thing, it looks like that there would be all kinds of complicated angles and things like that. But let me show you a super easy way to mark all of those cuts without using any type of math or angle finders. We're going to say that this is a rectangle for whatever size that you decided to build the outside frame. You would take 2 1/2-inch strips, and theirs looks like that they're about 1.5 inches wide, but go ahead and cut those a little long. And then what I would do while the ends are square, I would lay my first one across from angle to angle, and then from the inside, make my mark on both sides. Now that I have my 2 ends marked, head over to the miter saw and make those cuts. Now if you've made this thing perfectly square, you can make those exact same cuts for your second board. If you're a little worried about it, just do the exact same thing for your second one. So once you have your outside angles cut, you could either put a half lap on both pieces in the center, or you can install your first full length piece, lay your second one on top to where it fits, and then draw a line on the top and the bottom. Then you can make those 2 cuts, and then everything would fit in flush, giving you that design. So now you have the entire back done. So now let's talk about the hanging folder shelves. I'm going to estimate that if this is 15 by 33, that each one of these panels that they're using are probably about 10 by 15 inches wide. So these panels are a lot easier to make up than what they look. So it looks like that they've made it like a cabinet front, where you have your 4 outside pieces and then you have your inset board in the back. But that's not the case. If you look really closely, not counting the X design in the center, but everything else is one panel. The only thing that they have done is darken the center to make it look like it's recessed. Let me show you what I mean. So I just made this out of some scrap fence picket ends that I had laying around. And it's a 15 by 33. And obviously I haven't done any distressing or anything like that, but if you take a close look at this, the width is 2 fence pickets wide, and for the ends, the 45s just meet in the center, giving you this. Okay, so there's your panel. Okay, and you see this dark line that's going around? That's where I would actually darken the center to give it the illusion of depth, which is what they've done here. So again, I would just attach all of those parts using wood glue and brad nails. You can use dowels or put some pocket hole screws in the back. But once your panels are made up and you want to put this X design into the center, this is how I would do it. I would not inset this design at all. Yes, you could route out those 2 channels and inset boards into that, or why not just cut some 1/4 inch strips and put them on top? It's not like this panel's inset into anything. So again, you do you. But for me, I would just put these things on top and maybe even skirt the outsides of it with some really thin trim. So you'd actually be adding more dimension to this. Any way that you decide to do it, you get your 3 panels made. You just lay these out with the spacing that you would like onto your backing. On the base of each one of these panels, I'm sure that they've just used some really cheap square hinges on each side. And for the top, to get that angle, all that they've done is drilled holes in each end of the panel, folded that panel up, and wherever those holes fell, drilled a hole into the backing. And then took a couple of pieces of rope, ran it through there, tied knots on the end, and bam, you have a 3-pocket file holder. They wanted $65 for this, and I'm positive that they have shipped this in from overseas. So for me, I would actually keep the price right around that and focus on the fact that it was handmade by you. And this next one, they are calling this a wooden desk organizer with a bunch of remotes in it. And they're wanting $30 for this thing. Remote caddies and things like that have been around for years. And now of all times, we have remotes for everything. So we need something like this. And the super cool thing about this one is you can build it for dirt cheap. This will make a great fence picket build because the dimensions on this are 4.5 by 5.5 by 7.5 inches long. Since most fence pickets are 5.5 inches wide, perfect. So let's break this down. The 2 end pieces are going to be our most complicated part of this whole build, and it's not complicated. This is it. It's 5.5 inches tall, and I cut it at 4.5 inches wide. As far as these angles, I measured in 1 inch on each side and made a mark. And then for the bottom part of this angle, I measured up 4 inches because based on this picture, that's kind of what I figured the sides were. So I had my 4-inch mark and then my 1 inch in. Then I just cut that angle and repeated for this side. Now I have a template. I can actually lay this on a picket all the way down the thing if I wanted to and cut several of these. So we'll need 2 of these end boards. And then for the sides, we'll need 2 boards that are 4 inches by 6.5 inches long. And then the center divider, we'll need 1 more board that is 5.5 inches by 6.5 inches long. For me, I would assemble this with brad nails and wood glue, starting with the sides and then slide the center divider down into the middle and then throw in a couple more brad nails from each end. As far as the bottom, it's all they've used is a 1/4 inch piece of plywood and tacked that from underneath. Now you could inset that bottom if you would like, but I really don't think it's needed. Now these black decorative brackets that they have going around the sides, this is all they are. So you can go to any big box store, you can go to the lumber and framing section, and these corner brackets are less than $1 a piece. They have all different kinds, all different sizes. This one only has 2 holes on each side. Looks like this one has 4 on each side. They have those 2. Spray paint those things black, and before you install those, go ahead and paint these things up any way that you would like. They've just whitewashed theirs, which looks pretty good, and threw the brackets on. If you had all of your parts and your boards were already painted, I'd say that you could put one of these together in less than 5 minutes, throw a $25 price tag on these babies, and let them roll. So while I was looking around the Target website, and for you non-fancy people, that is French for Target, while I was looking around the Target website, because I'm not fancy, I found this, and I thought that it was super cool. So the measuring rulers for kids have been around for a long time. I guess whenever it was no longer acceptable just to, mark it on the door frame like we always did. But what caught my eye about this one was it was folded in half. Usually you just see them like as a sticker or something like that just on the wall, but this was a nice piece of wood that folded up. So this wall ruler is 7.5 inches wide by 6 foot tall by 3/4 inch thick. All right, so how about a 1x8? Right now at the big box stores, 1x8s are selling for $10.60. Let's say that you wanted to build 2 of these. It would actually be cheaper if you just bought a 1x8x12, and you can pick those up for a little under $16. So this is as simple as it looks. They've just cut their boards down into 3-foot sections, put a couple of hinges on the back, placed a removable wall hanger on the back of the 2 boards while they were folded up, and then you could unfold it and place your second wall hanger on as the child grows. And if you're wondering why the 1 foot so close to the bottom, that's because they want you to hang this 6 inches from the ground. If it were me, instead of hanging both of these boards together, I would just put the hinges on the back board and have it to where it could be stored away and then added to it later. I just know how kids are, and I know mine would be like smashing their brother's head in this thing, opening it up, whatever. That's just how I would do it. As far as the lettering goes, stencils. You can actually pick up these number stencils pretty much anywhere because these are the sizes that are intended for mailboxes. Easy to find. Now this would be a perfect project if you had a laser or a CNC. And I actually have an example in the Thunder Laser, so let's check that out. Hot off the press, and this is what I'm talking about. Now, if I was actually making this for a customer, the only other thing that I would do is personalize this thing. Anything personalized will sell, and especially if you put grandkids' names on this, or even the family name, where like the Peech family tree is growing. Just little quirky stuff like that, people love it. Falls into one of those categories that people will spend money on. A guaranteed sales when it comes to spending money on someone's kids or grandkids, especially whenever they are young. It's kind of like the baby book thing. You know, the firstborn, the baby book is like this thick, and it has like the first time that they pass gas in there. And then the second child, it's like a little bit thinner. And then, you know, it's like first birthday, got this present. And then the third child, you know, here's their book. So all jokes aside, grandparents will buy this for their grandchildren, and grandparents are probably the one with the money. I would leave the wood natural pine because almost every ruler I've ever seen in my life has been made out of pine. Plus, if you put any type of an actual finish on this, they won't be able to write on it unless it's with a permanent marker. So if you make these things up, they look nice. I don't think that you'll have any issues at all getting 50 bucks a piece for these. And this next one I personally thought was super cool because it's actually made out of reclaimed wood. And it's this $90 candle holder. This thing is 23 inches long, holds 6 of those candles that you can pick up for next to nothing. But honestly, I shouldn't even be showing you guys this thing because for 90 bucks, obviously, they are the only place on earth that has access to material that looks anything close to this. I mean, look at that old bolt hole in the old... And no, I did not purchase this from them. I have a pile of this stuff laying around. It's reclaimed wood. When you are out and about, just look at old lumber that has potential. I mean, look at this thing. It's almost identical, except theirs has a little dent close to that hole. Now it's identical and I can get 90 bucks for this. I bet if I hit it again, I could probably get 100 bucks for it. All jokes aside, you can use any rustic piece of lumber that you have, old 4x4s, anything like that with this natural worn patina. Space out and drill your holes for your candles and you have a candle holder. Again, I just wanted to show you this just so you keep your eyes open and keep your mind open whenever you're out looking at different things. You do not have to use new material to get awesome results. And actually, like I've told you before, reclaimed material will actually sell better because there's always a story that goes along with it. So a huge shout out to the Patreon community for making this channel happen. Also check out the Discord channel where our brag board is at. You can submit your own brags there, ask questions to the community, or just hang out with like-minded people. I'll make sure to throw the links in the description for both of those. So until next time, guys, I want you to be breaking down items in your head. Everything that you see, you try to figure out how they built that, how you could replicate that, and put your own twist to it to make your own. You will surprise yourself at how easy that this will become once you start doing it. The biggest word of advice as your abilities grow to do this is do not tell your family that you can do this, because then they're going to be sending you pictures of stuff that they want built. Okay, so I'm just kidding on that. Well, they're really going to send you stuff that they want built, but take care of your family, take care of yourself. And until next time, guys, you do you and go make something. See ya.